Just popping in real quick to let you guys know this episode of I Didn't Read Your Book is going to be a little bit longer. Anirudh and I went on for about 3 hours. I was deciding whether to make this a 2-part episode or if I should just throw it out there for you guys and not bury the lead, not hide anything from you. I think you guys are perfectly capable of taking in 3 hours of conversation. But if it is too long and you don't like this, I guarantee you there's going to be longer conversations in the future. And if you prefer that I just chop them up and give you part 1 one week, part 2 the next week, just let me know. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of I Didn't Read Your Book. Today, we are going to be talking to Anirudh Garg. I am definitely going to have to ask for a pronunciation on that. And his book is The Greater Man, A New Paradigm for Modern Masculinity. So definitely something I'm interested in. So this book hasn't yet been published, but I am on his Indiegogo website. So instead of reading the back of the book, we'll just read the webpage. The Greater Man is the beginning of a dialogue on how young men should develop a healthy relationship with masculinity. This book pulls wisdom from many different cultures, time periods, and leaders to address their failures and to build on their triumph to create a productive relationship with masculinity. My name is Anirudh Garg, and I am the author of The Greater Man. I wrote this book because I saw firsthand the crisis of masculinity plaguing young men, and I wanted to do my part to build a space for them to grow. My hope is that in reading this book, you will discover the first steps to a healthy relationship with masculinity. In this book, I hope to instill in you the same sort of passion and excitement that I have for masculinity and how we can weaponize it against today's greatest struggles. Interesting wording there. Ultimately, I want you to see this book as a tool to help you understand how connecting with your masculine traits responsibly will yield you dividends. There's some more here, but because it's an Indiegogo page, and he has not yet finished. But I mean, you get the picture. So I'm definitely very excited to have this conversation. Again, this is another opportunity for me to talk about stuff in my personal life, and I was what you would definitely refer to as blue-pilled up until as recently as about a year ago, and I had a not so great relationship situation. And I think of myself as a nice, smart, caring, all the not like a nice guy, like a nice guy. And all the things that I've been told about, being a gentleman and this and that doesn't really pan out the way they say, to say the least. So I'm interested to see what our author has to say on the subject, and I definitely think it's going to be an extremely interesting conversation, at least for me. Let's bring him in. All right, welcome. I've got the proper pronunciation. Anirudh, welcome. I am very very excited to be talking about your book, The Greater Man. So we just read about what you've at least the top part of what you've written on your Indiegogo page, which will be linked below. Make sure you go if you're interested, get a pre-order so that you can learn from this man. But I think the we talked a little bit about the red pill YouTube space, and for me that's what I think of when I first saw your book and read the back of the book. So right off the bat, I just want to ask you how comfortable you are associating yourself with the red pill or the manosphere.
So generally speaking, the goals of the manosphere or the red pill community is men should invest in themselves, make themselves better, make themselves the kind of people who are good for society. And if that is the message, if that is the only message, I am 100% down. Unfortunately, one of the issues that I see within the broader manosphere is that they spend a lot less time talking about solutions. They spend a lot more time engaging in misogyny or just complaining about women, which Okay, sometimes you had a bad deal, you've had a bad experience, you want to talk about that. That's completely valid. Spending all your time talking about anecdotes about how this person treated you terribly, this person treated you terribly, isn't the environment for creating good solutions. I'm very much interested in creating solutions. If I think, is there a problem for men? I want to dedicate all my energy to fixing that problem, less on playing the blame game about whose fault that is, what is the cause,
Absolutely.
because people get attached. Oftentimes we are part of the problem and we don't want to acknowledge that. So that defensive mechanism makes it very difficult to move forward. I don't care about being vindicated, being self-righteous. I want results.
Nice. So if you had to break it down and into one or top three, top five main just overall things that you talk about a relationship to masculinity, and I notice you use the word weaponize that relationship. And so, especially in the age of toxic masculinity, which I believe is a lack of masculinity, what would you say to someone who is reading that, who's not quite familiar with this type of thinking, and would come off and, oh, this is just some misogynistic whatever?
Well, it's very difficult. Actually, I've gone to painstaking lengths to not be misogynist. I actually start off the first sentence of my book in the introduction is women are better than men. Here are 50 reasons why. Because I'll give you an example just in data. According to the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, they did a study in developing countries and found that when the disposable income of women increased, they would spend 90% of it on their family. Whereas if it was men, it was only 30%. They would spend a lot of money on drinking, gambling, prostitution. The money went into places where it wasn't. And I agree with you on your understanding of toxic masculinity. I don't really like the term. I think it leaves a lot out, but it is a lack of masculinity. It's a lack of good behaviors and good systems for men. And so we're looking at the world right now. Men are overall largest proponents of violence, crime, all of those. And that is because we have given men insufficient systems in order to escape those. So if I generalize masculinity as three parts, first is being accountable for people in your life. Those are your family members, those are your friends. It's about building a strong community. We need that. We are social creatures. The second part of masculinity is finding a drive, something to propel you forward, a reason to live, something that fulfills your needs emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. You need to be challenged. And that drive to do better, providing good for other people, that's an important part of being a man. And the third and most important is being in control of your vices, breaking your chains. If we leave you alone, especially if you're a young man, there are so many things that'll distract you. There's the internet, there are video games, there's gambling, there's alcohol, there's vanity. There's so many things that prevent you from living your full life. And that self-control is incredibly important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And we accountability is one of the men and women, but because we are men and that's our role, just accountability in general seems to be a very rare thing. And I'll give you an example just from today. I was I was meeting up with I'm a dog trainer, and I was meeting up with a client that I had worked with over the winter, and we'd finished up our program, and it was like, okay, you guys are all set. Just keep up the good work, and you should be good. And of course, if you hire a dog trainer, someone come to your house every week and tell you do this, and then once you're done and they leave, obviously, you're gonna go back to normal life. But some people let it lax a little bit more than others. And so I go back there, they call me and they said they need help. And not only has the first dog gotten, back to where it was, but they got another dog on top of that. And it had the ingredients to be a contentious situation. And because basically, long story short, we did the training, they finished the training package, and they kind of just stopped keeping up with everything. And so the dog was like, oh, cool, that was just a thing we were doing. Now I can go back to, do whenever I want. And so while I'm trying to explain this to these two women who live together, it was very obvious that anytime that I had something to say that would nail down, well, here's why this is happening, maybe we should try this instead, there would be a deflection. And, that's, again, I think it's easy for people in this space, again, to focus on what other people are doing and specifically what women are doing. But I think that it goes for men as well. And it's just, people have, well, let me ask you, how closely do you think the lack of accountability is tied to the sense of entitlement?
So I think that oftentimes they can work both ways. So you can have a situation where a person is incredibly responsible, or they feel like they've earned a lot, and they can use that power and feel entitled to greater things. You'll see this as a hallmark of abusive relationships. People will keep bringing up things that they've done for you, like, I was there for you at this point. And that allows them to overstep their boundaries. I do think that there's some relationship between the lack of accountability and the sense of entitlement. But I think that oftentimes they might go, at least on the margins, in different directions. It's a little difficult to say in a generalized topic.
Right.
But in the example that you gave, I actually am very happy you brought that up, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know much about training a dog. I would love a dog one day. Haven't had the pleasure yet, but it's about creating a good system.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely, 100%.
So it's not just a simple of, oh, he's a good dog or he's a bad dog. It's about, how do we take care of the dog, train it in such a way that he will be a good dog all the time, that he's kind to strangers, he's playful, he understands when to do what. Right. So I view the same thing everywhere, that if we don't have systems, we end up being very self-destructive.
So let's, I like what you said there. So let's pick that apart. And very simply, I've broken the whole thing with the dog training down. When I'm doing, evaluations or the first lesson is just kind of laying out the roadmap. I basically say that it's, well, first of all, that most dog trainers fail you by leaving you with a dog who knows tricks instead of an obedient dog. And the difference there is their respect of your authority. Yeah, if they know that they can get something for it, then that's one thing. But again, going back to understanding their roles and what they're supposed to be doing, whether or not they're going to get something out of it, comes down to that respect of authority. And, so first it's just teaching, okay, what does sit mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? Then the second phase is more about getting better at doing those things. But then the bulk of the work for at least the dog owner is to then take all of that, and over a much longer period of time than that you'd be working with me, to implement the system that, okay, when I say this, that you got to do that. If you don't do this, then this happens. And you set up the structure, and you set up the boundaries, you set up the rules. And dogs are creatures of pattern. So if you set up a pattern of, this will happen when this, this bad thing will happen if you do this, and this good thing will happen if you do that, well, then they're going to pick the thing that gives them the good reward. And, it's obviously, when it comes to dogs, it's a little bit more black and white. But, I have a degree in psychology, and this is a lot of dog, because it's that simple. And I like to separate simple and easy, because training a dog is not easy.
They are different things.
Yes, it is rather difficult, but it is very simple. And so a lot of my job is relaying this, the dog's perspective and how the dog is seeing the world and the owner's behavior to the owner, so that they can understand what kind of structure they are establishing and what kinds of patterns that they're reinforcing. And I mean, I think the same exact thing plays out in society with people, and with the general public being the dog, and depending on the circumstance, whether it's a politician or your parent or a religious leader or whatever it is, or the media, some celebrity being the person to set the boundaries. And the problem I think that we with that specifically is that, think of, and again, bringing it, back to a very relatable thing with the dog training. Even if you are a dog lover and you have a good idea of how to interact with your dog and what you want your dog to do, there's a pretty good chance that you can kind of get it to work. But the difference between that and somebody who legitimately knows what they're talking about, has studied this, has been able to pick apart the factors of what's going on, and like you were talking about, come up with a workable and doable solution, is much more than getting the dog to do any one different thing.
Yeah, I agree with you emphatically. It's actually one of the key reasons why, when I say that it's so, at least this is where the analogy I think between humans and dogs kind of breaks down, in that it's really difficult to reason with a dog. You have to at some level use force, whether you get to eat food or not. We don't want to create those systems with humans because we have the ability to articulate ourselves and express how we feel in a way that an animal cannot.
But yeah, I mean, I don't want to get you off target. Sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, just to push back a little, the basic philosophy of my dog training is to establish those consequences, positive or negative, and then you do let the dog choose, and they see, oh, okay, it's not worth it to not listen to you because you're just going to stand in my face and sit until the end of time. And so they are making that choice. But I point taken. It's not a perfect analogy.
Well, yeah. So actually, you hit up a great reason for why. If a dog messes up, there's an immediate consequence. There are immediate results. Oftentimes, when we make decisions, there's so much of a lag. You could be making all the right decisions now, but you won't see results until 10 years later. Is that any reason not to do the right thing? No. So we have to take different systems into account, different social systems. For example, great example is education. Right now, women are outpacing men in getting college degrees in the United States. In fact, they're outpacing on master's degrees as well. And one of those reasons is because, at least for women, they've been conditioned to at least sit down in a classroom, find it acceptable to sit down, do your homework, do your grades in that structured routine. And at least it's a lot easier for women to do it. We've created a system where we encourage women to do that. And we say, young men, if you don't do good in school, it's fine. You can join the trades. You can become a truck driver. You can become a plumber. You can become an electrician. Those are jobs that we need. A lot of them are disappearing. Right now, we have a huge shortage on nursing jobs. Men aren't taking that, mostly because they've been conditioned that nursing is not a masculine behavior.
Male nurse?
Yeah,
that's
unfortunately, nurse practitioners are expected to be making $6,000 right out of nursing school. Those are jobs that men are not going to have. And those behaviors that we create, at least going down the line, make it very difficult. And that's one of the self-destructive natures of men. Men are very predisposed to gambling addiction. There was a study from Harvard University where they found that in college, men and women are equally likely to engage in gambling. But men are almost 9 times more likely to develop a gambling addiction and lose large amounts of money, and 3 times more likely to commit suicide because of gambling debt. Wow. And this is not just for people who destroy their lives in gambling. Even people on Wall Street who gamble professionally, they found that women managed hedge funds on average would have at least 10 to 20% higher returns than male managed ones. And one of the reasons why is women are more risk averse. So while it's important we condition people to be willing to take risks, those long-term thinking, those things, creating those conditions a lot more complicated than just, I would say, training a dog. Not that training a dog is easy, but it requires different things.
Right. So I mean, that's a crazy stat. I didn't know about that at all. So we've kind of been talking a little bit more amorphously. So getting back to the book itself, obviously your demographic is men, but are you targeting younger men? Are you looking for an older audience? Who are you?
So the two primary demos are young men. Those are men between the ages of 11 if they're very precocious, but more realistically in their late teens, early 20s. And it's more importantly for caretakers. These are your teachers, parents. Those are the two demographics, because while obviously it's important that we encourage men to have a sense of agency and responsibility. There's no such thing as self-made man. We all have people in our community, our mentors, who are all there to help us. And at least giving them the tools to help us is also the move for moving men forward.
Can you elaborate on giving them the tools to help? What do you mean by that?
Of course. I'll give you an example. One of my best chapters that I've written personally, my favorite chapter to write was Vanity, was on how men in the modern era are becoming more and more driven to vanity. So it used to be that women had about 4 times more plastic surgeries than men. This was back in the early 90s. That number has drastically changed to the point where it's expected by 2025, men will soon outclips women in average number of plastic surgeries done.
No way, really?
Yeah, and on top of that, they found that the quarantine, the pandemic, that has increased the number of plastic surgeries done by men because people are always looking at photos of themselves on video call. They're getting very self-conscious and they're thinking, okay, my chin is weird, my eyes are weird, I have wrinkles, I want to get rid of that. And those conditions have pushed men to pursue plastic surgery at much higher rates than ever before. And this actually goes into a deeper trend about men having a real difficulty dealing with their self-image. I'm pretty sure you've heard of the body positivity movement, right?
Lizzo.
On some level, I like what they're doing. On other levels, it's absurd.
Well, yes. I mean, body positivity, it should be the idea that you shouldn't make people feel bad for physical attributes. That is not the same thing as celebrating being unhealthy, which is what I think it's turned into.
I agree, but this actually cuts both ways, because while you'll see body positivity for women to showcase more, I guess, normal body types, for men, if you're looking at any athletic clothing, I'll take Gymshark, the brand, for example, you're showing hyper muscular men who no doubt are on steroids, who are pretending to be natural and promoting this type of lifestyle.
Oh yeah, there's no body positivity for men.
Yes, there isn't. So what you're showing is a hyper fixated idea of what it means to be a man. And we're reinforcing that to young children to where they start pursuing it. A lot of young children will start lifting in their late teens. They'll start thinking, all right, I want to look good. I want to look big. It's like a big thing. I was doing the same thing. I wanted curls for the girls. That was the notion all the time. In the beginning, you realize it's kind of dumb. And you realize that guys who are way smaller than you, who actually focus on developing the personality.
There's not many guys way smaller than me. I'm only 5'4", but sorry to interrupt.
Oh, but at least I've noticed that me being able to improve my bench press did not help me in dealing with girls at all.
Well, that's a good excuse not to go sign up for the gym. So thank you.
Well, I mean, do it for yourself. Don't do it for other people. But what ends up happening is that men take it to an extreme. They feel as though because it's not solving their problems, this one thing, they take it to the extremes. It's why I'll give you this horrifying statistic from the UK. There are over 1 million men who abuse image and performing enhancing drugs in the UK. That is 3% of all men in the UK have or are abusing steroids in order to look good. Not for sports, not for athletics, primarily for aesthetics. These messages that we're sending are quite literally coercing, in a social sense, young men in order to harm themselves using steroids, doing irreparable damage at ages as young as 15, because we're telling them that is what it means to be a man. Because they're saying you cannot accept who you are, always try to be bigger, always try to be better. And this is the end result. That's not a good system. And
that's a big part of what a lot of red pill manosphere, masculinity coaches, all these kinds of people. One of the first things they say is get in the gym. You got to be in shape. That's a non-starter. What do you say to that?
So I think there are levels, right? Going to the gym will give you a sense of discipline. It'll add exercise to your life. You'll be healthier. If you feel healthier, you'll be more productive. Your energy levels are greater. You can do other things great. But I'm studying economics right now. I'm hoping to do my PhD in it. There's a law of diminishing marginal returns. Going from, I guess, obese to lean, huge benefit. Going from lean to shredded, smaller benefit. Likewise, going from weak, barely able to do a pull-up, to at least being a little bit athletic, be able to play sports, enjoy yourself, not need the be able to open jars, simple stuff, your life is going to improve a lot. And you're going to be able to create a good system for yourself. You're going to create the conditions for being disciplined in other areas of your life. But if you take it to the extremes, well, this is what happens to a lot of professional athletes. They are quite literally putting a ticking time bomb on their lives. They're training at such high level, they're destroying their bodies. And if you're an NFL player, it's a good chance that you probably won't have full functioning brain by the time you're out and retired. So going to an extreme, there is a negative impact on you. So while it's important to say get in shape, what that get in shape means is live a healthier lifestyle, live an active lifestyle, live a lifestyle where you are a person that other people want to be around. It should never be just get big for the sake of getting big.
Right.
No, getting big is a part of a much bigger puzzle. Exercising is a much smaller part of a much bigger puzzle about creating a good system. It's not one thing that fixes your life. It's a good system.
Right. Right. Gotcha. That's definitely a good take. So, obviously, talking about the body positivity movement, that is clearly a reaction to the same type of thing that you're talking about, that women experienced maybe a decade and a half ago. And, that I don't know the exact timing, but I guess around 80s, 90s, there was a much bigger push culturally for women to have a certain look. Or I don't even know if that's true, but it's been increasing. And that wasn't always the case with men. I remember the dad bod era, and that's definitely not a thing anymore. So how do you see that? How do you see the differences in being able to, whereas for females, the body positivity was, don't just starve yourself to be a model and all that kind of stuff. On the male side, it's don't inject yourself with steroids and everything. But, as you mentioned, that's more on a gradient. Because like you said, going to the gym, having an active lifestyle is a beneficial thing. And I feel like, and this could be just because I'm a guy, but it seems like a healthy system in that way is a lot easier to identify in, healthy versus unhealthy is a lot easier to identify in women, because of this cultural thing that you're talking about, where being big is great, and being athletic means that you have that discipline, means that you put the time in, means all of these different things. And being specifically skinny, for women, it was more just about not being fat rather than being skinny. How do you think that's different, and how do we avoid following in the women's footsteps and just celebrating people who've got arms like this, or the complete opposite, and you're a fat fuck, and we're like, oh, that's okay.
Yeah, so this comes back to the issue of vanity. Most of the time, women, at least historically, they adopted a certain look or for a certain fashion style because of how they were treated in returns. We're visual creatures. If we see, I'm guilty of this too. If I see a person who's very attractive, I male or female, I might be more inclined to be a bit more patient with them, a bit kinder to them.
How dare you?
That's our human biases. That's who we are. We instinctively view people who are good looking or innocent as people
pretty privileged.
Respect. So that's just an issue that we have. Everyone has this, which is why men have an issue of vanity, because it ends up becoming very destructive. When women have body dysmorphia or body issues, it's bad. When men do it, it's more explosive. We do our issues with vanity and body dysmorphia are much more violent. I don't know if you've heard of like bodybuilders like Rich Piana, who had hearts that were engorged like 4 times their size and just stopped. We'll go to extremes far greater than women.
And this definitely comes from a place of ignorance. But I feel just from, I don't have any numbers, but just from my perspective, it seems like the extreme case of male vanity is far less prevalent than things like, eating disorders in women, or even going back to the plastic surgery. As you said, male plastic surgery is on the rise, but with women, that has always been a thing. So I definitely agree. I mean, again, bulimia and anorexia could definitely be brutal to the human body. But there's definitely, weight to what you're saying about the extremes of the male seeking vanity. But I would argue that while that's true, the women seem to, and because they focus on it for themselves, not that we didn't do it, but they focus on it and they take it to not maybe the full extreme, but take it too far a little more often. Is that accurate, or?
So the data will be it goes the other way on this. So here's the issue. I'll take the example of the UK. 3% of the male population using steroids is a massive problem because these are not prescribed by the doctor. They're often illegal. They could be cut with other substances. And you don't exactly know. Yes.
Real quick, are these numbers just in general, or are we talking about athletes specifically, non-athletes specifically?
So the actual study site, it's from the University of Wales, I believe. The Welsh government did this. They found that this is 3% of all men. So 1 million men, which is about 3% of men. I did the fraction. 1 million men in the UK use IPEDs, image and performance enhancing drugs, for aesthetics, not athletics.
Say that one more time.
Aesthetics, to look good, not athletic performance.
Because so that's where I was going, because again, if the use is higher in males, my first thought would be, well, there's a lot more male athletes. And so that's, I would attribute a higher amount of usage for these PEDs for that specific purpose. Whereas in women, it's not for, that gain. It's just for the peace of mind, or lack thereof.
Yeah, but this study specifically said the usage of these steroids, not for athletic use, only for looks.
It was specifically for
yes.
So okay, sorry,
aesthetics, not athletics.
Gotcha.
So
I misunderstood.
So while it's true, here are two systemic factors. One, if a woman has an eating disorder, she can talk to her friends and they'll at least try to help her. There's a social safety net, which creates a system for you to get out of it. We've created the environment for at least women to talk about this. We have not done that for men. If a man has it's called bigorexia, the obsession with getting bigger and bigger. If a man has the obsession, oftentimes men in his social circles will promote him to get bigger and bigger, because I can just speak from personal experience. Ever since I started lifting, I went from being skinny fat to a little bit bulkier, I guess, a little bit bigger. 90% of the compliments that I got were from men. Very few did I get from women. Women didn't care.
That's but men did. that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, because
so
of the good.
Oh yeah. So you're creating a social environment where men feel that they're compelled to do that. And at least now, if a man comes forward and says, I have a body problem, unfortunately, it's not taken as seriously if a woman does it. This goes back to a woman being viewed as innocent, more deserving of sympathy. That sympathy doesn't exist for men.
And I completely agree. And I think the failure to realize that is the case, and that is the reality for men in general, that you're supposed to be in shape, you're supposed to make money, you're supposed to do this. You don't get extra credit for that. Whereas, like you're saying, with women, if they're any little thing, they've got the social net of not only their friends, but they have got their beta orbiters and any other system they've got. So that does make a lot of sense, because at least like you said, the numbers are rising currently, but before this, if you would have asked me who has bigger issue with body images, I would definitely say women. Very interesting.
Yeah,
And
so that's actually a big philosophy for this book. I wanted to be as data driven as possible because while anecdotes are nice, actually my publisher is a little upset with me because I didn't get enough personal interviews with people, so I had to go out and get some more. I was
tell them
very
you're doing the
data driven.
podcast circuit.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I did. So I told them that I wanted to be as data driven as possible because I don't. This is kind of the issue that I had with a lot of people in the manosphere in general. They speak a lot from anecdotes. And while anecdotes are important, it's very important that we understand people's experiences on a broader level, on a society wide level. We're going to have to look at the hard data, scientific studies, social studies that did the right statistical analysis to figure out is something a problem, is something not, because then at least we have an understanding of what's causing something and how to fix it. I'll give you a great example. It's actually very depressing, but 2/3 of all suicides are men. Men will kill themselves at much higher rates than women. And on top of that, women will attempt suicide more often than men. Men will be more likely to be successful. And at the end of the day, they'll commit more suicides. One of those issues is that if a woman is feeling suicidal, she'll have a strong friend group. She'll at least be able to talk to people. She'll seek counseling. Men, a lot of men struggle with making friends, especially ones when they're out of college, they're out in the real world. They feel alienated for whatever reason. And so if they find themselves in a deep place, in a dark place, things can start compounding onto them. Hence why
Absolutely.
I dedicate such an important chapter, an important 1/3 of my book, talking about how it's important to build a community, strong friends, strong families, building good relations with people, because it's a give and a take. You'll be there for them when they need you, and they should be there when you need them.
And I think an important part of that is understanding something that I didn't understand until I was introduced to this RP stuff. And it's kind of cheesy to label it and all of that. And it's not like I'm a diehard, but just reading like The Rational Male and getting these types of and books like yours to just get an idea of the message that's not pushed out by mainstream media. And shoot, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, what were you just saying?
I was just simply saying that it's about creating an environment. I encourage men to create strong communities so that if they ever have an issue, that they're ready to talk about it. We view it as a sign of weakness and fear to not talk about our issues. And I want to move that. A strong person will be able to talk about how they feel and be unafraid of judgment or criticism.
And here and that's exactly right. And here is what I didn't understand is that the whole idea of equality and of the genders, sexes, whatever, that we're all equal, we're all the same, da 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 da. I've been through those dark times. I've had those dark thoughts, and it's not that I didn't have a support system, but it just happened that it was easier because of the culture. It's easier to open up to a female friend, and I didn't realize that was something that you shouldn't do because I'm talking emotionally to the same women that later I want to present myself as a potential sexual mate, and those things don't really mix. And I think an important part of having that support system is making sure that, and I mean, as I'm saying this, kind of sounds more obvious than I realized, but to have the right type of people, and that having the type of people who will not only understand what you're going through, but have the tools to guide you and help you, if at least just to be a sounding board. Because even the fact is, as much as we say that a man can never understand a woman's experiences and this and that, it flows both ways. Women are not equipped to deal with men's problems, and because we see the world so differently. And I think a lot of what kept me in that state for a long time was, I would talk to some of my female friends, and nothing against them. They were doing, they wanted to help me. They took the time, all of that. But just from their experience, it all came down to, oh, you're a great guy. Don't worry. Just, don't worry about it. You'll meet somebody eventually, and just keep looking, and then all that kind of stuff. And that isn't helpful. As nice as it sounds, that's how it works for women. That's not how it works for a 5'4" skinny dude.
Mhm. No, I understand you. And I think while I disagree with your conclusion, I understand your sentiment completely. I do think that it is difficult for a man to experience a woman's problems or to understand a woman's problems and for a woman to understand a man's problems. That's true. But I don't think that's a reason to not try to understand.
I
Because
agree. I agree. I would just
because
say that. Go ahead.
yeah, so because historically, so this goes to my broader issue with the I guess the manosphere, the red pill environment, is that while they're very good at least identifying problems, they don't do a very good job fixing it. One of the big things that they talk about is how the criminal justice system is incredibly biased against men, how it's super harsh against men, and men and women who create the same amount commit the same crimes. Women are more likely to be let off. The government is more lenient with them, and that is true. But that usually comes in an environment where we have a criminal justice system that is very harsh in the first place. It seems that women have done a better job fighting for men's rights and I guess men's standard of living than men have by themselves. It were the feminist movement in the late 70s who fought to abolish the draft. They were the biggest proponents on ending the draft. And I feel like the manosphere creates a environment where they spend a lot of time blaming women for the issues that women do contribute to in society. But instead of moving forward to find solutions, they spend a lot of time in self-pity, which while misandry exists in feminist circles all the time, they have been a bit more effective in finding solutions. And I think that's something that men should learn from feminists is be more effective in finding solutions.
I got to disagree with you there because the early real feminist movements, the suffragettes and stuff like that. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the purple haired Riri on Twitter. That type of feminism. I think the only reason that it's worked out for them, so to speak, is because it fits with the progressive political narrative that they should have this live your best life and no matter what you're a boss babe and you're doing everything right and nothing that you could do could warrant you being treated mean or being homeless or anything like that. Whereas with men, it's very black and white. And while we have different problems, we have different things, when men don't perform, then it's a very different scenario from when women don't perform. And I think that comes back to the newer age, the third and fourth wave feminist movements, where everything that a woman does is just fine. Going and just to take something that we're not really talking about behavior, but it's same in the same realm, the believe all women thing. Now, obviously, we're not informed in favor of that type of unwanted behavior, obviously. But to say believe all women is ridiculous. And there is no way that men would be able to put out a message like that and just have automatic credibility, automatic anything. Everything is built from the ground up. And that's just not the way it is for women. And I'm not hating on women for that. That's just the way it is. And realizing that that's the case brings you to, okay, I need to find solutions. But I don't know that I can say that feminism has really helped men in that way.
So actually, this is a great point. We actually have so many points of agreement here. So I agree with you 100% that, again, this is the misandry in the feminist movement. They want to say it's a man's fault that all of these problems exist. Not exactly. I'll give you a good example. Female genital mutilation is very prevalent around in third world countries. Oftentimes it's happened and men don't even know. A father won't know what's happening to his daughter because it's women conducting violence on other women. And so people would never know. And those things go both ways. It's not just a matter of playing the blame game because yes, men treat women terribly, women treat men terribly. That's not productive. What ends up mattering is what system allows bad things to happen. which that type of discussion, at least in rhetoric, the feminist movement is pretty bad at it. They're very good at making slogans, which
Right.
they're catchy, not at all useful. The believe all women, the correct slogan should have been investigate all allegations. There were men who were abused by other men. We didn't hear them. It's not believe all women, it's investigate all allegations.
Yeah, I mean, Corey
Understand
Feldman
what
was
is happening.
on national TV talking about stuff back in, I don't know, the early 2000s or the 90s, and nobody cared. Now, to be fair, I guess nobody really cared about Weinstein and what he was doing with women at that time either. But once it came out, everybody, man, woman, Republican, Democrat, everybody's like, whoa, 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 we're not having this. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where women have this innate, or society has this innate contradiction where we want to protect women and everything, and yet we want them to be equal in the sense that they don't need protection. And it's this contradiction of wanting to be progressive when it suits them, but more traditional when it also suits them.
Well, I'm really confused on what you mean by the contradiction, because it's not a matter like, let's just throw aside the blame game. On terms of messaging, the third and fourth wave feminist movements are terrible. They create more enemies and they create a toxic environment in the way that they talk about issues. The issues that they're talking about are real. Sexual discrimination, sexual harassment in the workplace is very real. They are, on at least the solution level, they're doing a pretty good job addressing it on the solution level. They play the blame game poorly. I'll give you a good example. One of the big issues that men have has to do with at least mass incarceration, about how men are treated in the criminal justice system. Feminist groups have been fighting for, at least third wave feminists working in groups with like Black Lives Matter and other, I guess, progressive leftist groups. They've pushed a lot for criminal justice reform so that the law is more forgiving of men, especially young men, those who have come from poor areas, who've had lack of male role models in their life, that are leading down spiraling paths, to create at least small systems for them to escape. Those are material differences. And I wish that the men's rights movement, the manosphere, the red pill would spend more time working on those solutions, which there is misandry in the feminist movement. I will agree with you 100%. There are a lot of issues with it.
And just for, if anyone doesn't know, misandry is the opposite of misogyny. It's
but it seems when it comes to boots on the ground, I just haven't seen many men's rights movement be effective in changing systems to help men.
Yeah,
and women with no intent of helping men have created better systems for men, which I find is like that kind of hurts.
So I mean, just using your example, you say when Black Lives Matter is creating, changing things so that men aren't being prosecuted as well. But then you see videos of San Francisco where people are just going down the aisle of CVS, stealing everything and looting because they know, and then they can go and go to a Black Lives Matter protest and burn down a building and get arrested and no bail and out the same night. These are things that, I mean, I don't have names in front of me, but these are actual real things that are results of this type of thing. And it's just a coincidence to me. And I consider myself politically homeless. I was a Bernie bro back in those days. And then, I hated Trump with everything. And then as time went on, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't know, Trump's still a dick, but why are you making me defend Trump? And then, now with Biden and everything, I'm not happy with it. So I definitely don't feel comfortable putting myself in one camp or the other. But it just seems convenient that Black Lives Matter is doing this type of stuff just when a bunch of their activists are getting locked up justifiably.
So I'm confused by what you mean convenient, because when I'm thinking about this, right, the goals of Black Lives Matter, what they wanted policy, is what I would try to evaluate if it's a good thing. Whether the members are there, it's hard to say. It's a large group. There's some really bad people who are probably just using it as an excuse to be violent. Anytime that there's a protest that turns into riot, there's one person who's thinking, here's a great time to rob CVS. I don't know who's responsible for what. I care at the end of the day on moving systems. Right?
Well, how much have you actually looked into the Black Lives Matter organization? I don't want to get too bogged down on this.
So by organization, do you mean the leadership or
yes,
their policies? Their leadership policies I've looked into deeply.
Meaning separating it from just people on the streets who are expressing the sentiment that the lives of Black people do in fact matter as well.
So on two levels, their sentiments are one thing, but I'm talking about, so for example, have you heard of Campaign Zero?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
remind me, I've heard of it.
I'm not Campaign Zero is 8 policy proposals that they want for improving the community relationship between people of color and the police. Some of those include bail reform. Others include ending pretrial detentions, ending plea bargaining, which is a major issue, having community policing so that police are from the community. They know people in the community, that there's less distrust. Those material conditions, I've looked at analyses about how they would impact. Some of them were actually great ideas. Reducing pretrial detentions, they found in California. For example, the abolition of 3 strikes laws, that's what I'm thinking of. Abolishing 3 strikes laws in California would lead to a 10 to 12% decrease in homicides. There are economists who wrote a paper on this. I can send you the papers afterwards. The material conditions of the policies that they want. I care more about that. If you want to tell me that there are problems in their hierarchy and their leadership, I will agree with you. If there are bad apples, I will call them out. But at the end of the day, I'm not interested in the blame game.
Yeah, I think that's where we're getting bogged down, because I think all of the things that you're saying that they're doing are absolutely great. I don't see it through the prism that we can say, oh, Black Lives Matter is the criminal reform thing. They're more about, changing the structure of society overall and making things based on race and all of these other things. And they're while a material benefit might be that men are getting more lenient sentences, I don't know that I'm comfortable saying, good job, Black Lives Matter. I think the Innocence Project, things like that have been out there for a long time. But
I agree. I love the Innocence Project too.
And I don't want to get bogged too much in again, like you're saying, the blame game. But I did feel it. Yeah, I did feel it.
But then this is kind of the issue, right? We can say that, okay, men are bad. Men commit all these crimes. Men commit all this violence. There's also an understanding that has to be had where at least young men, if young men don't have a role model, it's much worse. Men who grew up in homes without a father, they're more likely to commit crime than their sisters. They're more likely to drop out of high school than their sisters. It's about creating a system. It's easy for us to blame these groups of people are bad. They're bad. But at the end of the day, the blame game only gets us so far. I want to create the question is, bad problems are happening. How do I reduce these problems? How do I fix these problems? How do I make sure that people are not in that position anymore? That's where I come from when I'm looking at this book. Because if I want to play the blame game, we could be here all night. I could say Republicans bad, Democrats bad, socialists bad, fascists bad. I can say all of that. So that doesn't change the conditions that create people picking those groups, those tribes. Because look, people who voted for Trump, I don't think that all of them are racist. Some definitely, all no. People who voted for him, they thought, okay, he's going to create a better world for me. He's going to create a better America. And if we all come from that same place, we all want a better society. All we have to do is look at it through the data and figure out what systems work, what don't. That conversation is super important. We can't have that if we're doing the blame game, which is why I try to stay away from it.
So let me see if I have your perspective correct, because you say you don't want to play the blame game and you're more focused on solutions, which is admirable and definitely what we need. And but the point I think I'm trying to make is that you can't come up with a viable solution until you understand where, and again, blame, I don't want to use the word blame, but where the actual problem lies. And, it's it's easy to want. So, okay, sorry. So are you saying that not that we shouldn't say, these people are bad, these ideas are bad, but that there's enough out there so that you personally don't feel the need to say it? Is that what I'm getting?
No. So, for example, it's always important that we understand what the problem is. I can tell you this is the problem. If we were to ask, what's a big problem that you see in the world right now that men face?
So,
I'll
I
take
mean,
that.
going on what you said is the lack of fatherhood, which I would then tie to, feminism and the idea I don't need no man. So that's why I'm finding it hard to separate. I'm not looking to necessarily have a political debate, but I don't know how you separate these specific types of issues and find the solutions without having some political prowess as to where that fits into the whole thing.
Understood. So that's actually great. Let's do this. You said you think that one of the reasons why there's such a big issue with fatherlessness in the United States is that women are saying that I don't need men, that they're kicking fathers away.
Right.
So now all we have to do is look at the data. Is that the problem? Because if that is the problem and we can empirically verify it, then we can immediately start saying, okay, this is the type of situation that we didn't change. We didn't incentivize women to not kick away fathers. We need to do something, whether it means tax breaks for people in married couples.
Well, I completely agree with you, but the fact, and going back to my point, the fact that 80% of divorces are initiated by women is an important thing to highlight when we want to get to the point of, okay, we don't want divorces to happen. So when we look at, okay, the first question is who is doing the divorcing? 80% of divorces are initiated by women. And so it's this idea that they don't have, they can do better. They deserve the world. They slept with an athlete in college. And so that's the man that should be getting. And then maybe they settle down and but then 10 years down the road, man, I should have been. And so that's where, again, divorce. And then you pile that on to, social media, and how before social media, a girl in the middle of Illinois had to pick from the dudes in her high school or whatever. But now that same girl can get on Twitter or Tinder or both, and be flown out to Dubai, going to Cancun and all that. So the same guys who she would have seen as viable options now comparatively are nothing. And so I don't see how that can be separated from the issue of broken homes and fatherlessness.
So this is the part where I'm confused, because I don't know how that contributes to broken homes and fatherlessness. The fact that, okay, your pool of dating options increase, you can find a better match for you. I don't necessarily know, because again, I looked into the study that you were talking about of initiation of divorces. There was a study from the late 2000s that found that 70% of divorces were initiated by the women, but that number was not statistically different from women in ending relationships. So whether it's a marriage or a regular relationship, it seems that there's a rate of women ending it by about 70%. Again,
so the connection is that from the woman's perspective, what her options before the social media things were on a range from, okay, there's Billy Bob and there's Frank, and Chad's actually he's got his stuff together. But now, because the options are so much more vast, then that same Chad from Illinois, who's just a great guy, works a blue collar job, makes 50K a year, that same woman is gonna be like, why would I talk to you? I have guys making $500,000 a year in my inbox, willing to do this and that. And so whether it's, like you said, whether it's relationships or marriages, the temptation for women paired with the sexual liberation which I do believe is a good thing for women. Women should have that freedom, but it comes with the consequences that now that you're not socially shamed for just sleeping around, then you can just do it, and that affects how you pair bond with other with people in relationships, and it doesn't help relationships go well.
Well,
And
so
then you end up with a broken home.
I think this is the part that I don't understand, which is generally speaking, when people have, we'll take the example of a woman who already has a child.
Okay.
So the assertion is that she will try to find another spouse, maybe someone who's better, someone who treats her better than her husband. Again, if that were the case, and let's say that they were prioritizing being a mother first, they could also feel that the environment for their child is not good. There are a lot of women who, there was a huge spike in the 70s and 80s because there was reform on who could initiate marriage, who could initiate divorces.
No
There was a
fault
huge
divorces
spike,
as well.
and there was a huge spike in the number of divorces, but a lot of those reasons were because women were escaping abusive relationships. So, I mean, we have to understand
So,
what types of
but
ending of
hold
relationships
on.
are valid and which ones aren't.
Okay, fair enough, but we don't have those answers. And like you said, you like to stick to the numbers. So while absolutely some portion of that 80% is justifiable reasons to leave, are we suggesting that 80% of relationships are bad for women? Because and even if that is the case, the women are the well, let me not go there. So yeah, let me say that.
So
We're talking about 80%. So if we're saying 50%, 52% of relationships are ended by women. Okay, well that's that doesn't really have any statistical significance because of the numbers of people. Sometimes it's the men, sometimes it's the women, sometimes this, sometimes that. But it's not, I don't have, again, I don't have these numbers in front of me, but where that divorce spike first happened when the laws changed, I don't think the divorce rates, I don't think that spike is proportionate to the increase between then and now. And again, I'm just pulling that this out of my ass.
I was just talking about the initial spike, but right now I need to understand this. Does it make a difference if it's women or men initiating the divorce?
In what context?
So, for example, if it was 80% of men initiating divorces or ending of relationship, would that substantially change the material conditions for fatherless homes? Because one of the reasons why women tend to get custody of their children is because judges are much more likely to view women as capable caretakers than men, which is blatant sexism. Men and fathers and mothers are equal parents. That is something that we need to fix in the law. And those are some things that we need to fix with legal reforms. But I don't necessarily, if the father initiates 80% of divorces, but that bias still exists, that judges by default have a bias to giving their sole custody to a woman, not necessarily the best parent, then I don't know if that would necessarily fix the problem. See, this is the issue. I don't know if what you're saying could be true. I just don't know if there is data that says that because women initiate more the termination of more relationships, marriages, and in both divorces and breakups, that causes that contributes to fatherlessness. I don't know if that analysis exists because, like I said, econometrics. I care about finding causational relationships. I can tell you this right now: for every 10% increase in the density of liquor stores in a county in the United States, there's a 28% increase in domestic violence. We have done the data, we've crunched the numbers, we found that this is a causal relationship. Those are stuff that I can speak to very confidently because we have numbers to analyze those trends. I could be wrong. I could just not have read the literature enough. I don't know if those same trends exist. I would say that at least what we know for conditions for fatherlessness are lack of job opportunities. Men who have stable jobs are more likely to be present in their child's life, whether or not there's a divorce. So I can say that is a good way to fix improving the job conditions for poor men, creating some sort of system for improving a more robust economy to create the conditions for that. I can say that is a solution. I just don't know if changing the laws of who can initiate a divorce will lead to those same outcomes, because I don't know if those are contributing
Yeah,
factors.
that's not what I was saying. I was saying, like you were alluding to before, I mean, there are studies on this. I don't have them pulled up, but I have read.
If you
Read
have them,
these.
I would love to read them, because I
Yeah.
always need to look at the latest data and information.
So if it was if it was men who were ending relationships 80% of the time, then the question and the solution would change, because now we need to figure out, okay, we need to get men to want to stay in relationships. But that's not the situation we are dealing with. So the fact that, okay, it's there's an imbalance, and women are overwhelmingly less or more likely to end end a relationship. Why is that? And what is the solution? And so, the things like not promoting the normalcy of single motherhood and having children out of wedlock to begin with, I don't care about like the religious side of it, but just having a kid with somebody you are going to live with and be a parent with, so that kid can be in a two parent household. And I don't see how you can separate that from the progressive feminist narrative, because it wasn't always like that. And while there may be a certain portion of those that are justifiable cases where the woman should leave, that doesn't account for the statistical significance. Otherwise, we would say it's not statistically significant.
So if there are progressives who are saying that single mothers are just as effective as two-parent households, they're idiots, they're wrong, I'll disavow them.
That's
generally the discourse, at least in my experience. I'm on the left. I volunteered for Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020. That's the circle. Those are the circles that I've run in. Most of the sentiment is there are a lot of single mothers here. How do we help them so their children live better lives?
And
if that's a discussion, I think that's a discussion to have. Not if the statement is single motherhood is better than traditional marriage or two-parent household or like a gay couple that adopts, that's completely wrong. That's factually untrue.
Right.
But the statement is create policies like childcare, for example. In Biden's new COVID relief bill, there was a $3,000 child tax credit that would cut child poverty in the United States by 56%. That is one of the biggest victories in terms of dealing with children and even young men who suffer poverty and are molded by those circumstances to make bad decisions. That is one of the biggest pushes forwards in order to create material conditions and material changes. Those kinds of victories are what I care about.
So, and I agree with you. But I don't know that simply throwing money at the problem fixes it. In fact, I think that is what created this acceptance of single motherhood to begin with. The fact that there's a welfare state, you get your child support, you don't have to any of this stuff. That is a plan for many women. And of course, not all women. All women. Of course, we're not making blanket statements like that. But absolutely, the laws are set up so that if you feel like it as a woman, you can get a guy to get you pregnant, and you're set up for life. Period. That does not lead to a society that is going to value marriage more, or at least, the staying together of people who are parents.
So if that were the case, if that is what is happening, I would agree with you 100%. I don't believe that it's happening, because which is that are the welfare state or public policies tailored in a way to enable or single motherhood as creating that as a viable option to live. I don't believe that is the case, because the benefits that the federal government and state governments give by no means match the cost of having a child. The average cost of having a child is about $14,000, and so $14,039. These are numbers that are from 2018, so it could change after the pandemic. But most people never receive that much in government benefits just explicitly for having a child. And by no means is having a child as even worse if you're a single mother NPV positive. Having a child is almost always a financial drain on anyone. Married
that
couples,
doesn't stop that. I agree with you, but that doesn't stop women from thinking that that they have a ticket. And again, when we're talking about if we're talking specifically about the government, that's one thing. But again, if we're talking about incentives, not only just reasons to stay in a marriage, going specifically talking about marriage in this one, but not only incentives to stay in a marriage, but incentives to leave. If you're some bum of a woman and you can just go and, if you are mildly attractive, then every man, for the most part, on any socioeconomic scale will find you attractive. And if they're not red pilled, it's very easy to finesse them and set yourself up for life. There is no golden parachute like that for men. And the fact that it exists, and it is not only there, but it is so widely used and, more importantly, accepted. It should be not, again, going back to the idea of body positivity we were talking about. The idea of being a single mother shouldn't be something that is inherently praised. Doing the work that comes with it is admirable, absolutely. But having a child without a male partner is an irresponsible thing to do, full stop. And so I don't, again, not going with that idea that, okay, if you're in this situation, we're not going to treat you badly, and we want to, make it best, make the best of it, and of course, not put any of it on the child, and make sure the child has the best. But that, your number one thing in this book was accountability. That takes the accountability off of the women of saying, well, I made a mistake, and I gave up my dating value, which is the goods, to someone who didn't deserve it. And then they become the victim because they have slept with some bum who isn't, the high economic status that's going to get them paid. But it's happening all over. So you have women on the lower end who are just irresponsible and having kids just because they're not taking precautions and they're not ready for it. And yes, those women are not cleaning up by any, but that they are still doing it. They're still creating homes where both where kids are being raised without a man in the picture, and it's not it's celebrated. It's not just this idea that, I mean, wasn't there a movie about this that where I don't know, a TV show or something where she was just like, I don't want to wait to find somebody. I just want to have a baby, and it's all that's such selfish and frankly shameful behavior, in my opinion. And while I can understand the desire to want to have a child, especially if you are a woman and you're getting on in your years of fertility, I can understand that. But then to go ahead and put your desire ahead of what is best for your potential offspring, and that being accepted, seems to me like it is not congruent with having males in the home, masculinity being a good thing, all of these things. I think they're directly connected.
I think here, and this is one thing that I don't understand, right? If you're saying, if we live in this world where it is easy for a woman to find someone who's better, like if that's very optional, then we wouldn't really have a case of single parent households, because women would just find a man who's willing to take care of her. I feel like if that was the world, that would be a system that self-corrects.
Hold on, we got to separate two things. You don't need to have a man lock you down and want to be with you in order to have a kid by that man.
That's true. So, but if you ever need help to raise the kid,
right? But I'm saying,
be able to find a man.
So go back to can you reiterate your original question about what you didn't understand about this?
So yeah, so you're saying that it's very easy for women to find the best possible person, best possible partner. If that were the case, we would not have an issue of fatherlessness, because if a woman feels like, okay, this man isn't treating me well, I'll find a better man. I don't have to do anything. I could easily find a person to take care of my child or to help me take care of my child.
Just because he's better doesn't mean she's good. There's some shitty people in the world, and better than shitty.
It has nothing to do with her, but like simple cost benefit analysis of if a woman named Dorothy says, okay, this man is father of my child, he's at certain income level, I can find a man who's wealthier, I can create a better outcome for my child.
And this is where
is that a self-correcting problem in terms of the respective children?
Well, because we're talking about two different types of iterations of this situation. So the one is where a woman is going to go. There was some who was it? Some basketball player just got a divorce from this. He was like 19 years old, 27 or something. I'm getting the numbers wrong, but some famous basketball player got finessed, and this woman is set up for life because she knew what she was doing, and he didn't. So there's that on one side that is leading to fatherlessness, single mother. Da, 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 da. On the other hand, there is also just people who are not being responsible and are having kids just as by accident. So there's two different. We're talking about two different things. So, but in either case, even if the financial setup for the woman who made the mistake versus the woman who finessed an NBA player, in both situations, they've not brought anything more to the table, and now they are receiving benefits and this and that. And yes, it's not a glamorous life to be living off of food stamps and stuff like that. But my point is that the men don't even get that option. You can't be a man and of course, you have unemployment, you might have a disability, but there's no way that you can just get in there and make sure that the government is giving you money if you aren't doing good enough. You just become homeless.
Well, so actually, this is a very interesting thing. So again, this issue that you're pointing out, I don't know how prevalent this is. It's a numbers. I could easily see a situation, and this goes with my issue for the broader manosphere, that they take a couple of anecdotes and they blow them out of proportion as saying this is what's always happening. Which is why
to answer that really quickly, sorry, that I don't think it's picking out the anecdotes to be representative. I think it's picking out the anecdotes to be cautionary and to say this is what could happen. So make sure that you're aware that this could happen. Not saying all women do this, women are bad. Some do, but at least the people that I've been watching, people like Rich Cooper, Entrepreneurs in Cars, Joker, Better Bachelor, Alexander Grace, people like that. It's about, hey, you've been sold this fairy tale that women are these innocent little creatures, and if you're a nice guy and you go and you play by all the rules, that they'll eat that up. And that's just not what it is. Women have figured out that they have changed the game. And mainly, again, it's not all women. There are, I'm sure, great women out there in every aspect. But the culture of the woman that I'm talking about is becoming the norm and is becoming what is celebrated.
So again, the culture war, what we celebrate, that's a meaningful conversation. It's probably best, 100% best idea, which is to encourage people to be in strong, stable relationships before having children. That should always be the encouragement. We should always encourage that. I agree with you that on 100%. In the world where that's not what people are doing, what is the most effective solution to make sure that children have good outcomes, that there's some way to take care of them? Childhood poverty is a major issue. Children can't work. If they have no control of whether they're poor or not. If we create public policy like the child tax credit, which cuts child poverty by 56%, historic lows for the first time in American history, that's improving material conditions. Maybe we could live in an ideal world where we encourage everyone to make good decisions. When we're talking about systems, the best systems survive the worst possible actors. The best system is one where everyone acts shitty, everyone is terrible, it still holds together.
And would you say that about that's the case for marriage in the United States today?
If we're in a position where people end healthy marriages, people get into marriages in very unhealthy ways, they get married too quickly, too young, and that leads to divorces. If we live in a system where people make all the wrong decisions, we live in a society where most of the time, a lot of people make wrong decisions. We have to make systems that are able to counteract their wrong decisions. We have to make something robust enough to survive.
Why? If you make bad decisions, why don't you deserve the consequences?
Because your consequences are not your own. If there was a world where a man messing up means he was the only person who paid consequences for that, we wouldn't need systems. We would just think, okay, individual responsibility, people take care of themselves. Oftentimes, good example of children, if you make a mistake and you are a parent, your children is going to suffer. When they grow up, that's going to create trauma that's going to harm them for the rest of their life. PTSD, we have found, can survive in a person's lineage, in their ancestry for up to 4 generations. There are children still being affected for what their great-grandfathers went through in World War I, how that affects in mental illness, how that affects into substance abuse, drug addictions. We don't live we're social creatures. If we make a mistake, we are going to create harm for people on the other side of the planet.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
In that case,
I mean, before we gloss over that, because I want to sit on that for a second, because while I agree that overall what you're saying would probably, I'm just worried that further incentivizes the lack of accountability. And while it helps in the short term, maybe talking about 10 to 50 years, the cost of this reliance on the government even further only creates stagnation. And now we'll need something else on top of that, because everybody's getting this. And so there's still people left behind. And so no matter what system you have, there will always be people at the bottom. And while we can do what we can to try to help those people, I think it's an exercise in futility to try to eliminate, any type of negativity for anyone. And
so it is important that we create good social pressures for this. For example, you go back 50 years, it was very common to spank your child, to hit your child if they were misbehaving. We know now that causes irreparable damage to children, that if they associate you as authority and every time they make mistakes, they don't learn from their mistakes. They learn to be afraid of authority, be more fearful. It leads them to be more violent, more likely to commit suicide. We know that this does irreparable damage to their psychology. We know that. So now whenever we talk about parents hitting their children, we start saying, well, we haven't made it outright illegal everywhere. We're simply saying that is not the right thing to do. And we're reducing that slowly. Those social pressures are real. And so I think it's a matter of both. It's about creating good systems, whether it be government, institutions, businesses, creating those institutions, but also creating good social pressures. On some level, that is accountability. I'm very careful whenever I talk about this to not claim it as women are the cause of men's downfalls, because that is unfortunately.
And I just want to say I agree with that. I'm not saying that either.
Yeah,
I'm more devil's
advocate. But I think it's also
than
irresponsible to say you are the cause of all your problems. You're definitely contributing to your problems.
Well,
I think
it's
responsible for all of your problems.
I don't know that that's what the message is, or that people are trying to put out when they're putting it all on you. It's not to say your problems are your fault, but your problems are your responsibility.
That's better.
So even if we're talking about the situation where you grew up in a single mother household and it wasn't good, you didn't have a male father figure, I completely 1000% empathize with the fact that that's I was born to a doctor. That's you in America, you can't get much luckier than that. And I mean, I have my own shit, but neither here nor there. But the fact is, at a certain point, I don't get to, or rather, the people who weren't born into my situation, they no longer get to say, well, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, which again, I wasn't, but just for the sake of argument. But
yeah, that's not a helpful thing to say.
So again, it comes back to the accountability thing. And when we're saying, okay, well, even though you made this mistake, we don't want to take it out on the child, so we're going to throw money at the situation, and that will help the child.
Yeah,
but
so that's a good.
How is that any different than the welfare state that we've created since, what was it, the 60s? That's only gotten bigger and bigger and bigger as time has gone on.
Well, generally speaking, the absence of welfare states creates a lot of issues. Before Social Security, for example, over half of senior citizens were living in poverty. They were too old to work. They were dealing with disabilities. They just couldn't live.
Yeah, I'm not saying
create,
no social. So I'm saying we have too many now, and you're proposing we add more. So and with the thought of what I was saying before is that throwing money at these situations is how we got here in the first place. You're saying your solution is the same, is what I'm saying got us here in the first place. So I guess what I'm asking from you would be how is the government giving people money for making bad decisions not what brought us here?
Okay, so I thank you for letting me clarify. I think there's a bit of an oversimplification that you're doing. It's not all money given to people. Not all throwing money is equal. There are some ways you can throw money at a problem and it fixes it. There are some ways you can throw money at problems and makes it worse. I'll give you a great example. A lot of welfare programs like food stamps, SNAP, they're means tested, meaning that as long as you're making under a certain amount, you get the benefit. But that also means that if you make above that amount, you lose that benefit. If food stamps is $400 and you make $50 more, you've lost $350 in your benefit. That means testing apparatus created a system that prevented you from appealing and getting better. Which is why if we wanted to create good systems, which would be not to means tested at all. I don't know if you've heard of the universal basic income.
Yeah.
The concept of that.
Yeah.
A policy like that would do a better job giving people the freedom to pursue other forms of employment. There's a great study. They did a pilot program in the city and town, California. I forgot what. There are many cases where individuals use the UBI money to take days off of work so they could interview for other jobs. They got training to get better skills and to get better jobs. Though that's a different type of throwing money at a problem that creates outcomes. So sure. I care
but that's
about
I think that's an entirely different system. But
no, that is an entirely different system. Yeah. But that's what I care about, systems.
Right, but I don't think that's comparable to just adding another government stipend to something. If we're completely overhauling the economic system, and now everybody gets $1,000 a month, and then after that it's on you. Well, that's a much fairer system because you're not getting it because you're not being like the food stamps. You're not being punished for doing better, and you're not rewarded for doing worse. Which is the case now.
Exactly. So which is maybe we should be working towards.
So maybe
we should be working towards.
Yeah. So maybe I don't fully understand what you mean by means testing. Can you go into that a little bit more?
So means testing means it's essentially proving your poverty. You're proving that you qualify for this.
So it's just that you're below the poverty.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think it's even worse right now with all the pandemic assistance. And you have people making $16 an hour to stay at home. And so if they go to a job that's paying $15 an hour, they're losing money when you factor in the time. So why would you go and work if you can get more money by not working?
Exactly. That is a poor system. I agree with you. That's a bad system.
Okay. And so we agree on that. And so I would need to see the difference between what's bad about that system and what you're proposing for the children to single mothers.
Of course. So the end result comes down to effects on society. If the effect of incredibly high unemployment insurance is that people are disincentivized to going to work, then that's definitely a harm. Our economy is no longer productive. We're losing productive assets. Our overall output reduces. That's something that we can measure. As an economist, I can measure that pretty easily. The statement that child poverty is reduced by 56%, that is the effect of the child tax credit. That is material benefit. So economists use something called QALYs, quality adjusted life years. If you improve a person's environment, what benefit does that do later on? So for example, we do this with DALYs, disability adjusted life years. If you get an injury, a sickness, how does that reduce your overall lifespan? And what cost did that incur not only to you, but the people around you who are taking care of you? So QALYs is the opposite. If we gave you a benefit, which is reducing your likelihood of being in poverty, what's social outcomes there? That's a reduction into crime. That's an increase in graduation rates. That's an increase in employment, future employment. Those benefits that come as the byproduct of public policy are what create a good system. So I care very much things on the impact. I guess this is a utilitarian thing. I care less of what people deserve. I care about creating good outcomes.
Okay.
Whether or not a person is worthy of my sympathy, worthy. You could be the worst person in the world. I'll still be there to help you, because it's not a matter of whether you're worthy or not. It's just, can I create a good system out afterwards? Can I create good outcomes for people? Which at the end of the day, that's what I care about.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And I think up until recently, like I said in 2016, I was a Bernie bro, but it's a little too utopian for me. I think we're at least 50 to 100 years away from technology being able to perform enough societal duties that we can just give people enough money to do what they want, because there's just not going to be people in construction. There's not going to be people on oil rigs and stuff like that.
I am an anti-utopian. I don't believe in utopia. I don't think we'll ever reach it. I care about creating good outcomes right now. If you told me X policy is harmful for people, it keeps people in poverty, I'll say get rid of X policy. But it's very small. We play a game where victory is measured in inches and defeat is measured in miles. I want to get my PhD in economics. That's what I'm working towards right now. I want to be in public policy. I want to create good outcomes for people, because that's what I care about. This whole book is about what can you do right now to improve your life, a good system for yourself as a young man, and how you can build up on that. Because I can't give advice for every single person.
Right. And
I'd like to get, continue.
I'd like to get more into other aspects. We kind of got off.
Of course, this is going to go very long.
But I think just to bookend this, I think we agree that, obviously we want what's best, and it may just be a little bit of differing opinions on effects of certain policies. I think that's where our disagreement there really boils down to. Talking about improving childhood poverty, I kind of see that as, okay, well, what does that actually mean? What does that, and what is where's that money come from? All of these kinds of things. So it's easy to say that, but I could definitely be convinced that, oh, okay, all right, then this is, if our taxes got a receipt, it would be very easy to be like, yes, I want that tax, double that tax, but get rid of that one. So I guess that's, we can agree to disagree there.
I think we agree on a lot more than I think you feel like we disagree on. We agree on a lot.
No, I think we agree on a lot, and that's why I don't feel the need to harp on it, because I think it's just a little piece, and I'm much more interested in the masculinity part. Right. And so the term toxic masculinity is, well, let's start this way. What was your opinion on the Gillette ad? I assume you know what I'm referring to.
It was patronizing.
Yeah. Go on.
So what I felt with the Gillette ad is that, first of all, corporations love virtue signaling. It's a great way to make money. Never take anything they say at face value. What they were trying to say is that, all right, these behaviors that men do, they're bad. Stop doing that. And I think that's a terrible, terrible method for being effective. Whether or not they're right, irrelevant. That's not effective. Telling people that this behavior is bad is not a solution. Right. Saying something is bad is infinitely weaker than saying this is good, we should do good. Which I think the better way of saying, instead of saying, men, this is bad behavior, even if it is, that's entirely true. I don't believe in the blame game. I say, I am telling you, this is good behavior. I give people an affirmative vision of the future. I give people something to work for. That's what I believe. I believe the whole term toxic masculinity, it has the same elements of blaming men for creating bad decisions, when in reality, while we make bad decisions all the time, everyone makes bad decisions, there are conditions that we are led to make those bad decisions. And giving people an out, giving people a good example is so much more powerful than harping at people's flaws. I care about moving forward, not looking back. So and I think the Gillette ad makes that impossible.
So I brought this up because, I think it's an easy point of reference for most people. And then it's something that happened right around the time when I was starting to think differently about some of these things. And at first I saw it and I was like, whatever, no big deal. It's just a commercial. It's, and it was kind of cringe, but I didn't really, I didn't really take offense to it or anything. It was just a fucking commercial. And I still don't, I'm not going to get my panties up in a bunch about it. But the people who did, after listening to them, and instead of having their opinions just be brushed off by the feminists, oh, you're just an assassinator. You just want a cat call. That's all you want. That's an ad says you shouldn't cat call. So no. It's again what you mentioned, that it's patronizing. That Gillette thinks that the average man needs this messaging from them, nonetheless. And I resent that, because most men are not toxically masculine, while there may be a shit ton of toxically masculine dudes, because there's a shit ton of people, period. That is such a rare, well, not rare, that's a strong word, but it's not nearly as frequent as people make it out to be. And beyond that, most men are not cool with toxic masculinity either. Toxic males toxic males might get together and feed on each other, but the rest of us normal people are like, grow up. You're and so the idea that toxic masculinity is like, no, it's just like, they're shitty people, and we all agree that they're shitty. These ones just happen to be men. Same thing with the idea of rape culture. The idea that we live in a culture that celebrates this activity, I don't want to say it too many times, is asinine. But that's just you go on any college campus and it's just like, yeah, of course we do. No, and name me one person who's not an arpist who is down with that type of behavior. We all agree that it's bad. So how is that the culture? And these ideas get perpetuated, and that's how it leads to gaslighting of genuinely toxic and confident behavior gets pushed into this toxic space. And now just being a man, being masculine, is now a politically incorrect thing. Okay.
So you said some stuff that I agree with, and there's some that I'm going to push back on. Starting from the basic. I agree. Most men are amazing. Most men are doing good. They're doing the right thing. They're trying to push society forward. They're building the best for themselves, their families. That is the case. But this comes to the issue of accountability, which is what happens when we don't have a good system to deal with bad men. Because give a similar analogy. There's an issue with policing, right? There are a couple of really bad cops, and it's making it very difficult for there to be relationships between certain communities and their police. Not most cops are amazing people. They're doing so much good for their community, but there are a couple of bad ones. It's not just the issue that there are a couple of bad ones, that police unions and sometimes police officers themselves will work to cover bad cops. That ends up becoming this issue, because that lack of accountability, that's when it becomes, oh, okay, then there's like a toxic masculine element or a toxic policing element. This becomes the same issue. It's one thing that if someone is, harassing women, it becomes a broader issue if there are people who are trying to excuse that person's behavior or trying to absolve them of that accountability. So when people say that there's an issue with, I'll take a good example of rape culture, it's not the idea that we're promoting rape, but it's that, okay, maybe that's not that big of a deal. So I'll give you an example.
Who do you talk to that says that's not a big deal?
So it's not a matter of it's a big deal or what they say. It's also about how their actions reflect it. I don't know
anybody, male or female, that isn't immediately, viscerally affected by hearing about that. I don't know anyone. I know that there absolutely are people out there. That's not the case I'm making. But like you said, where is this celebration? Who's out there like, yeah, dude, you got it. I absolutely reject that. That's men.
So it's not just like a celebration. It's insufficiently doing enough to combat it.
Which would be what?
So I'll give you a great example. University of Texas, one of the biggest campuses in the country, they did a recent study that found that 19% of women on campus admitted to being sexually assaulted, either by a classmate or a friend. They felt unable to come forward.
And how are we defining that? Because now we're getting into assault. Yes, because now we're getting into because we're getting. I mean, sorry, but kind of rhetorical. Because now we're getting into the whole thing where if both two college students are drunk, they hook up, she's allowed to the next day be like, actually, that was, let's call it a violation. That was, that. So I don't understand how you square that with us saying, and then everybody is supposed to believe all women. So I don't understand where there is this lack of condemnation.
So it's not okay. I'll make it step by step. If there's an issue where a person is accused of, let's not even say sexual assault, abusive behavior in general towards women, it'll often be the case that, one, if it's a situation between a he said, she said, they pick one side over the other. That makes it very difficult for us to say, okay, did something bad happen? Because here's the situation. If one of your good friends was accused of sexually assaulting someone, you're at this crossroad where, did it happen? Did it not? And
Right.
you might decide, okay, this is my friend. I know them. I know them for a fact that they're a good person. I'm going to defend them. And as a good friend, you're doing the right thing. But that could create the environment where you might inadvertently be supporting someone who's a rapist. And there's actually a great study about this. They found that in different samples, anywhere from 1% to 4% of sexual assault allegations are patently fake. Overwhelming number of the time.
Let me take that point. Let me ask you something then. So if you're in the situation where you're accused, and I don't know, I lost it. Sorry. I lost my train of thought. But I think what I'm trying to say is, found it. So let's say my best friend in the world is accused of something like that. You're goddamn right. I'm going to stick by him because I don't believe that he did that. But I will absolutely support the investigation to see and find the truth. And then once he has been proven to be guilty, I absolutely will condemn that person. And
exactly.
Obviously wouldn't want to.
That's what we should be doing.
That is what people do. That is what people do. Except even further, they don't even let the trial run out. You're just presumed guilty. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? What happened to it's better than 10 guilty men go free than one innocent man incarcerated?
No, I agree with you completely. That's the issue. But in many places, what we would love that to be the ideal. In many cases, there's a lack of enforcement for that. I don't know if you remember the Brock Turner case, for example.
Yeah.
He was, I think you're familiar, right? He was a swimmer, very gifted athlete. He sexually assaulted a woman. He was caught. But at any given point, the judge was making excuses saying, oh, it was the woman's fault. She was enticing him, yada, yada. Those are examples of rape culture.
I disagree because ask any random person on the street about what they think of Brock Turner, and nobody's gonna be like, he got it off easy. He should have only been he was good. No, everybody thinks Brock Turner is a piece of shit.
Exactly.
I mean, except for that judge, maybe. But
But here's the issue, right? It's once again like effects versus people's intent. We could intend that rape is bad. Rape is bad. But if our actions don't reflect our intent, there's a big issue. If we do a bad job, so for example, right, if there's a situation where people like Brock Turner can get away with that, if there's a situation, I'll give you a great example of, have you been following the news of what happened at Blizzard?
No.
Okay, so Blizzard, the gaming company, made World of Warcraft. They had a massive situation, sexual harassment at the workplace.
Is this Gamergate?
It's awful. There's literally psychosexual nightmare. There were cases where there was one woman who was sexually assaulted at a Christmas party. She was repeatedly harassed. HR would not let her seek outside help. This part I'm not too sure, that she was forced to sign an NDA. She ultimately committed suicide, and then one of the men who assaulted her started sending nude photos of her after her death.
Okay, let's take this exact situation.
Mm-hmm.
How many people are like this guy? How many people are supporting this guy? How many people think that what he did is in any way anything other than horrible?
Unfortunately, there were way too many, because not just the issue that one person did something bad. It was the fact that there was an apparatus protecting them, non-disclosure agreements, HR policies, his fellow friends, colleagues. There was an entire system that made it very difficult for individuals to come forward.
Okay,
The
so
issue
let
is
me
not,
let me ask
it's
you
the
a different
defense
question.
of a friend can
Yeah.
create bad outcomes.
So I think maybe we're getting bogged down on the semantics. So let me ask you a different question. If I'm trying to word this properly. If we would you say okay, would you say that we live in a drug culture?
Yeah, we carelessly promote the use of drugs irresponsibly.
Okay, would you say that we live in a theft culture?
I don't know what you mean by a theft culture. We don't promote theft. It's not socially acceptable. It's not viewed as morally righteous. Do we do a bad job? If we turn to terms of effects, I think we probably do live in a theft culture in that we create systems for mass theft to happen and we fail to deal with it accountable.
Okay, so that's so then yes, this is merely a semantic disagreement because
yeah,
I get on the same you know on the same grounds. I would say thinking about it, drugs is actually a bad analogy because we do definitely live in a drug culture, especially me. But the theft culture. If you're saying we live in a theft culture because the systems allow this and so on and so forth, I would just say that well, anything that happens, then we live in a culture of drinking water.
So
we live in a culture.
So the reason why I say we live in a theft.
Hold on,
culture,
let me. But the point being, just because there is theft, just because theft isn't always at the forefront of what everybody's fighting against, doesn't mean that we either celebrate or lack the condemnation necessary, in my personal opinion. And so I would not call it. I would not say we live in a rape culture. I would not say we live in a theft culture.
So I would never say we live in a murder culture, because we do a very good job holding people accountable for when they commit murder. Theft, we never do.
Not really. 98% of murders are unsolved. Okay. But I guess when they do catch them, we lay down the law. So
yeah. I don't know if it's 98% of murders are unsolved. I'm not unfamiliar with that statistic.
I'm pretty sure it's 97.
We can hash that later, but I'll give you a great example, right? Theft. The largest form of theft, barring greater than burglaries, greater than
taxation,
robberies, not taxation, wage theft. In the 10 biggest states, wage theft is responsible for $10 billion of lost wages for people, whether that is because the company forces individuals to buy their own uniforms, denies them overtime pay, cuts promised benefits.
I gotta drive at least 20 to 30 minutes to each client, and I don't get reimbursed for that.
Yeah, those are all examples of wage theft. Those are not only things that we do a terrible job fixing, but they're actively promoted, where cost-cutting measures, whether it be Amazon or whatnot, individuals brag at how effective they are at reducing the labor share of costs. It's actively promoted. That's a sad state of business as usual. We promote these wage thefts as a way of cutting down labor costs. So I would agree we live in a theft economy, but it's because we create a system where theft is incentivized.
Okay, so
or even protected.
So throwing out this culture, that culture, because we have different definitions on what constitutes it being that culture. But the idea that sorry, shit, I'm gonna lose my thoughts again. What the last point you just made?
That it's the end result, or that the fact that we live in a theft society because not only do we, in some levels, in some small circles, encourage wage theft, we also
wage theft. So I mean, wage theft just seems like a term that doesn't really mean anything. I chose this job understanding that I wasn't going to get paid for my gas miles. Nobody's stealing that from me. I willingly accepted that I will pay for my gas in order to get the payment that I do for the
Are
lesson.
you a contractor?
Nope, W2.
Oh, okay. So you're an employee under a firm?
Yep.
Okay, then yeah. So the legal classification is wage theft for that. Wage theft is a legal
I mean,
term.
I'm not disagreeing that. I'm not saying you made it up. I'm saying the concept of it is lack of a better word, false, because theft implies coercion, does it not?
Yeah, usually wage theft is coercive.
But it's not, because I agreed to it. He said, here are the conditions. You have the choice to either work here or not work here. And I made the decision to accept those terms. So what's being stolen from me? Now, don't get me wrong. I'd love to be paid for my gas. That's not the argument I'm making.
All right. Please don't hate me for giving you this analogy. Please don't hate me for this. I'm going to give you the Coconut Island analogy. All right. You and one other person have stranded on an island. Your plane broke. There's only one resource in the island, coconuts. Right? The other passenger wakes up before you. They lay claim to all the coconuts on the island. They pile them up. They say they're yours. You wake up. You're in a situation and they tell you, you ask for the coconuts. You say, you're hungry. You need to eat. A single coconut is like 1,400 calories. I just found that out. And they say, I will give you coconuts if you give me sexual favors. Would you believe that that's a coercive engagement?
I mean, it really depends. Why did one person get all of the coconuts? Why wasn't the other person? You said there's only one.
Yeah, there are two people, you and another person.
And you said there's only one.
Conscious. They woke up first. Yeah.
So they woke up okay. So yeah, in that circumstance, because there is not other coconuts and there is no desire for, there's no. I mean, I guess I don't necessarily like this example just because forcing sexual favors, I don't really think is analogous to accepting a job offer. So yes, that would be wrong. But considering,
but if instead of sexual favors, it's like you become my employee and I give you coconuts, you would not view that as coercive? Because I would view that as coercive.
Well, yes, but I'm not on an island. There are other jobs. There are other dog training things. I can choose to do my own thing. So I'm not forced to either starve or go into the situation. I have the choice to either take the job or find another way to survive. There's no coercion in that.
All right, so perfect. So now let's move the analogy a little bit. There are multiple different peoples with different piles of coconuts, but they all ask the same thing: you become my employee. The effect of what happens to you doesn't change. You might have different options for who can exploit you, who can coerce you. That coercion is endemic. But then they're all being coercive. So yeah, so you're saying
the point is that I don't have a choice. The point is I don't have a choice of I mean, when it comes down to it, I don't have a choice not to work because that's reason. Yeah.
But so you are working by coercion. So coercion already exists. So
I disagree. I disagree because
then we have different definitions.
Survival requires work. And it's not employment, but there's output needed in order to survive. So that's survival. Nobody is forcing me to survive. I could go upstairs and kill myself right now, and I wouldn't have to drive anywhere else. And while that's the only other option in the scenario you're giving, because everyone who has coconuts is doing the same thing, instead of it just being one guy with one coconut, now it's 5 guys with 5 coconuts. It's the same analogy. It's a lack of freedom to do something else, and say for the other person to lay out their terms. Hey, I've got the coconut. You want the coconut, and I want my nutsack. So what are you gonna do? Now, if there are other ways for me to find sustenance, then that's not coercive at all. Because all right, then don't take my coconut. Go find your own shit.
Okay, yeah. So I think you draw the distinction where you don't view the transaction as coercive because you have another option. Whereas I view the transaction itself as coercive.
How so?
Because effectively you're bargaining your freedom for your ability to live. Whereas, again, I believe freedom is the most important thing for human beings. We need to have moral agency and agency of ourselves.
Say that one more
from an
time.
ethical standpoint.
I'm giving up my. Say that one more time about freedom.
So you're giving up your agency, moral agency, in order to survive.
And in what scenario can you not do that? If before civilization, or take any other animal.
Yeah. So a hunter, for example, if you're just out in the woods foraging, you have not, there's no coercion involved because you are choosing to live. You're choosing the actions to by how you live. If in this scenario where you are coercing, there's only one resource.
Not at all. Not at all. Because you are in the same context. We're saying forced. That's not, somebody physically forcing you or putting a gun to your head. You are forced to create shelter. You are forced to find food. You are forced to do all these things, or you will die. So how is that? So if we're all forced to survive,
nature is forced to. Nature is oppressive and coercive by itself. That's true. We're human beings. It becomes an ethical issue when it's human beings creating those same conditions onto another person. I think you would distinguish between.
Why do you?
Because obviously we draw a distinction between like a pack of wolves killing a man and a person killing a man. There are different moral interactions because one has caused a human being capable of understanding pain has caused pain onto another people. I view that coercion as very different than the coercion nature gives onto you. I think you would agree with that too, right?
Yes, but only in the context of, the same way I would put more agency if my dog shits in the house than if my bearded dragon does. Because he's capable of more. So it's not because I know that he's capable of understanding these things. Exactly. I expect him to live up to them.
So I view it as I view this type of coercion explicitly harmful because you are understanding that this person is in a dire state of need, that if they don't work for you, if they don't have those coconuts, they're going to die.
Not if they don't work for you, if they don't work.
Yeah. So if they don't work, they're going to
die.
Yeah. So if they don't work,
right. But I agree that that's already. I agree that that's the coercive situation. But what I'm saying is that is not analogous to the wage theft. That's not the same thing.
No, it is exactly the same thing because if, for example, you're in a job, let's say an Amazon warehouse. If you try to say, okay, I don't want to work these overtime hours, you're fired and replaced with someone else. You don't have the ability to.
Right. But my point is there is no existence without what you're calling coercion. And nature coerces us, like we said, if we're in the wild. So how is human nature, which is part of the broader nature, at fault for a system that exists within that much larger system?
So that's effectively saying we are equally at fault. So we live in a world where everyone's abandoned and thief. We're equally at fault if we're abandoned and thief. Effectively saying nature's out to coerce us. So if we coerce each other, that's fine. I feel like
I just think that you can't be stagnant. I think I feel like you are overusing the word coercion. You're not. I wouldn't call surviving in the wild nature coercing you. I mean, technically, yes, you can word it like that, and I would understand what you mean, but that's not the same kind of thing we're talking about when you're talking about the coconuts, or you're talking about
Harvey Weinstein. I'll not use the word coercion. I'll use evolutionary incentives, biological incentives. I'll use that.
And I agree. But then I agree with you, and then I don't see anything wrong with that because it is the way it is.
So I think you agree with me on this. You agree with this part. If an animal kills a human being and a human kills a human being,
it's worse for the human.
Yeah, no. Which is the greater moral problem? What do you see as a greater objection to your morality?
For the human to kill.
Human killing the human, right?
Right.
So we do that because we're human beings. We can understand each other's pain. An animal can't really understand our pain. Right. Some are intelligent enough, they could maybe get it, but most of the time they won't. So we can understand that there's a violation of human agency, human autonomy, human empathy there. So likewise, that becomes the same issue with coercion. Actually, how did we get to coercion as an issue?
Because we were talking about the wage theft.
Oh, wage theft, yes. So likewise, that's the same thing. If a person is in a position, they're in a minimum wage job, you docking their overtime pay, something that they worked for, that is theft. If
that is theft, but again, and maybe we're just crossing wires on what we're calling different things. So again, I agree with you. The coconut situation is coercive. I agree that docking overtime, stuff like that, is coercive because, you're already in the position. But when I am unemployed and I am searching for jobs and someone offers me their terms, I then have the choice to accept or not. But unlike the coconut scenario, it's not like the only other option would be someone else who's going to give me the same deal. I can go and find somebody.
Do you think it's a moral imperative for us when we're trying to create a better world? Oh,
real quick, to tell him, and because of that fact, I would reject the theft culture thing. And so we, going back to the other type of culture with masculinity and all of these things, I don't know that I don't know that we see what is the meat and potatoes of culture in the same way.
Maybe we don't. I view culture as largely human behaviors and then how they create a system. Culture is a system like anything else. And I view as, if I were to say we have a rape culture, do we create a culture where it's easy for people to get away with sexual assault? The fact that we have things like NDAs, the fact that we engage in things like in activities like victim blaming, create that environment.
Okay, and I agree with you, but I would argue that because those things are in place for a grander purpose of preserving the integrity of the justice system, that even that this one aspect in this one crime, because it's a very personal and visceral type of thing, it feels like it should be treated differently. But that doesn't work. It has to go under these same things, and laws are the laws. And if you're not, it's rare for you to be, unless we're talking about a Harvey Weinstein, which again is coercive and as wrong as can be. But everybody is against that, and nobody wants to promote that. And I would say
is a perfect example. For why I believe we have rape culture. Continue
because you think he was doing it for so long. Is that what you're going to say?
No, not just because he was doing it for so long.
Okay.
No, the fact is he had women sign NDAs. He had women silenced. He had entire legal team there to defend him. It wasn't just Harvey Weinstein committing horrible things. It were all the people who covered for him. That was including people who he assaulted, then went on to sing his praises. That is also an example of rape culture.
Okay, and
creating a system where I would disagree is rape culture.
Where I would disagree is that, say we're talking about a money laundering scheme, right? And there's people who are allowing this to happen and whatever. That doesn't mean we live in a culture that celebrates or protects money laundering. That may just be a crack in the system that somebody has exploited, and maybe definitely there's cracks bigger than others. And absolutely, when it comes to economics, the game is completely rigged. But talking about comparing the Weinstein situation, Weinstein is not representative of men. He is the outlier. He is the one that he is that guy. If we lived in our culture like that, then we would, if not celebrate Harvey Weinstein, we would be defending him and people are doing this, which is wrong, or blaming the women for saying, well, you chose to do this, that, and the other. And that's wrong because for obvious reasons, not that the women have zero accountability, but the power dynamics and all of that.
Okay, that's great. So do you agree that victim blaming is part of rape culture? Because you're creating the conditions where saying, oh, you deserve being raped or you invited it.
No.
So for example,
because there is simple truths. You can hold two things that are not mutually exclusive. There we go. Two things that are not mutually exclusive at the same time. We can say, hey, you should not have walked in that dark alley, with your Rolex and gold chains. That was stupid. That was a dumb thing to do.
Okay.
But also, we put the blame on whoever jumped you and robbed that stuff from you, on them. Both things are true. It was very stupid, and you should be shamed for doing a stupid thing that puts yourself in harm's way. That doesn't absolve the accountability for what the people who are actively doing bad things in whatever case. But we can't absolve, again, going back to accountability, we can't absolve people of their decisions just because it ended out not the way they wanted.
Mm-hmm. So
otherwise, we're in a situation where if what you do is good, then you get credit. But if what you do ends up badly, then it's everybody else's fault. So you get all the credit, but none of the blame. That's the situation you're setting up here.
So I'll push back a little because I think it's a matter of like what's within your rights. I think we all believe that we have the right to wear whatever we want. I think you would agree with that.
Yeah.
You also have the right to walk around a city that's safe.
Absolutely.
Right. If the consequence of you exercising your right is a violation onto you, well, we can easily say that you are stupid. There's no blame that I can give because what you were doing was exercising your rights.
But in a stupid way. Like, yeah. You have the right to walk in traffic too. You have the right to walk off a building. Oh. But
it's illegal to walk in traffic. That's jaywalking.
Okay, but you can't. But you can do it. But I mean, there are things that you can do legally that are not beneficial to you, and that will For example, you can go on to crypto.com and leverage 100 times, all the money that you have on Dogecoin. You can do that, and it's legal. But don't expect anybody to feel sorry for you when you've lost all your money.
Mm-hmm. So now my question is,
and on top of that, expect a lot of ridicule for doing something so obviously stupid. So that and not only should you expect it, but as a culture, we should promote a reasonable level of that accountability, not shame, but a reasonable level of accountability so that somebody else doesn't make that same mistake. If you are being made an example of for something that you chose to do that you should have known better, you're not going to be the only one who's done it. So instead of just saying, oh, well, anybody who's ever said anything about crypto, the first thing they say is don't invest more than you're willing to lose. But you didn't listen to that and you traded on, this is the same thing we're talking about. It's within your rights to go and leverage all the money that you don't have. But that's not a shameful thing. Would you be embarrassed to tell your family that you did that and lost all your money?
Well, yeah, of course. But
well, see, why? Why would you feel, or rather, why would you be justified in feeling shameful? You're a victim.
Oh, great. Because it's great. The consequence of me being shameful and not talking about me losing money is that no one knows that I lost money. The consequence of me being shamed to admit that I was sexually assaulted is that a person who's a predator is out at large. The consequences of those two actions are very different. Okay. So again, I'm a consequentialist. I care about the consequences. Right. The consequence of the victim blaming makes it very difficult for women to come forward. Not just women, men who are sexually assaulted. Men who are sexually assaulted are almost never listened to. Victim blame. If you see women being victim blamed, no man is ever going to come forward. He's going to receive it worse. Yeah, Terry Crews. It was women who didn't believe him. It was women who were victim blaming him. So that is what creates the rape culture. I think you would agree, right? It's not. I agree that the sentiment that you are alluding to is caused by these things. But again, I think the idea of a culture based a something culture means that thing is integral to the culture of the people, and that is simply not the case with theft, with any of these bad things. We don't have, like you said, we don't have a murder culture. There's murder all over the place. There's way more murders than I don't know these numbers. So when we say culture, do you mean culture broad, inclusive, like all of American culture, or culture that's within some certain subsets? Because I would never say we have a murder culture in all of America, but do we have a murder culture in military deployments? That's a specific group population with their own specific culture. Well, I mean, I think a better example would be like maybe in downtown Chicago or something, because military action is not in the same, that's not murder. But I mean, I can agree with that. So downtown Chicago probably has a bit more of a. But again, I don't feel like that. Talking about solutions, I don't see what that does for us.
What does
All
that
right.
do?
So in
To,
terms
okay,
of, so in
so
terms of
we do
solution,
have a, yeah.
victim blaming makes it harder for us to catch predators. It makes it harder for men to come forward. It creates material problems for men and women, men especially, because at least a woman comes forward, she'll have a support group. If a man tries to come forward because he was sexually assaulted, whether that was in a prison, whether that was as a child, whether that was in the military, there is such a level of victim blaming, such a level of absolute inability to engage with that, inability to deal with that, is that you're making the cover for a lot of sexual violence.
And I mean, I would just again push back that it's not. It, and maybe you would argue that this goes to your point that it is systemic. But I think the nature of what false allegations can do creates that disparity in the way that we treat somebody who is accusing somebody of burglarizing them versus something of that nature. And so maybe maybe in your opinion that is more proof to say that in fact we do live in this type of culture because it's hard for these women or men to be believed. But
I'm a
I just
utilitarian.
think that
I'm a
just think that
utilitarian. I care about the consequences. I care about if our behavior is, say, ridiculing people or victim blaming, men or women, that creates an avenue where it's difficult for women to come out, and therefore people who are predators to stay out longer. I view that as an issue, a moral hazard. So, which I would say victim blaming is a bad thing to do. And the fact that we keep doing it, even though technically there's nothing wrong with pointing out that someone is stupid, doing so in the not the right timing and not the right way can have unintended consequences.
I agree. I agree.
It's the same thing, right?
I think
you agree. Yeah. So we agree on this.
Yeah, I think we're
as,
circling the same page.
So that's the same issue, right? When women say, "Oh, all men are bad," that's not helpful. You're well in your right to say that. You can say, "Oh, these men do these bad things. Men commit more crime." Saying that all men are bad is not creating a good environment for creating solutions.
Right.
Likewise, victim blaming, same problem.
So speaking of these solutions, what kind of solutions can men find in your book, or women do if they want? What will they find in your book?
Masculine solutions. Let's start with one of my favorite, which is suffering. We are taught that we should really be ashamed of trauma that we've been through. If we've had bad experiences, we've had traumatic experiences, a lot of men are conditioned that let's just not talk about that. I disagree emphatically. We should wear our trauma on our sleeves. We should be able to accept these are the issues that I had as a child. I'll go first. I'll say that when I first came to the United States, I dealt with a lot of racism. My family came from India. We came right before the recession, and when the recession hit, there were children they would make snowballs and they put stones inside them. They'd chase me. They'd say, "Get out." It was both white kids, black kids. They didn't like immigrants. I was the immigrants taking people's jobs. I experienced that firsthand. And for the longest time, I was very insecure. I was very scared about making friends because any school that I moved to, because my family had to move a lot, that was the same problem again and again and again. And that made it very difficult for me to make friends and made me very antisocial when I was a teenager. So me being able to vocally say, this is the issue that I had, this was something that I did, I can talk to it in confidence, say, that's a problem that I had, I'm ready to fix it. Being willing to talk about the problems that you have is the first step to creating the mindset. You don't want to see yourself as a victim. You want to see yourself as a person capable of solving your own problems.
Right. So in that example, what is, I mean, I guess, are you speaking generally to the fact that you can't let racist comments and actions bring you down in general? Because again, pushing back on accountability and dealing with reality is that racists exist, and bad people who want to hurt you physically, emotionally, otherwise, do exist. And so what do you, again, talking about solutions, it comes down to, protecting yourself and being aware of what is out there. And I mean, I don't know. It sounds to me like, I don't know. I'm not really seeing where you're telling what part of that is telling men to be accountable.
Okay, so this is not under the accountability part. This is under freeing yourself of your chains, dealing with
Okay.
your vices. A lot of people, they go very resentful for harm that's done upon them.
Okay.
They say, okay,
Gotcha.
this society is racist, bad. These men were bad. All men are pigs.
So yeah, yeah. So in
Those
this,
sentiments,
yeah.
blaming other people is not very healthy.
So and so this is exactly why I like to stay away from terms like toxic masculinity,
Exactly.
rape culture, these types of things, because it's not helpful. We've spent all our time defining these terms, and only now are we talking about, okay, well, what are the solutions that we actually need? So just again, I am very interested in more of what is in the book. I think we've talked about those issues enough, but I just want to highlight why it's important to nail down those definitions and understand what we're talking about, so that when we go to find the solution, we understand what it is that we're solving.
I've enjoyed our conversation,
Oh,
uh,
me too.
for what it's
This is
worth. But no, I agree. I think we get bogged down in semantics all the time. That's just the nature of human interaction. We all use words differently.
that
We
also
live in a
means that
world.
that also means you know how to have a conversation, because if you're not bogged down in semantics at all, then you don't realize that can be an issue. So
Yeah. So
kudos to
communication is
both of
super
us.
important. Communication is super important. But when I say embracing your suffering, it's being willing to accept these are issues that I've had in the past. This is something that has happened to me and it hurt. Like you need to be able to tell people that you were hurt. Not in it's like, oh, I got stabbed. No, as in you, it left an injury on your emotions, on your mental health that you just, at the time, you didn't know how to deal with. But now you are focusing on being strong enough to deal with it. And you're not going to let that define you. Wear
Absolutely.
your, it's like wearing your battle scars. The Japanese have this great idea. I draw inspiration from multiple different cultures. This is the Japanese idea of kintsugi, which is when a pot breaks, instead of just throwing it away, they inlay it with gold and say it is more beautiful for the story it tells. Likewise, we should be able to express that, because here's the thing. Everyone wants to portray the best version of themselves. I was the quarterback in high school. Everything I did was perfect. Got perfect score on the SAT, Harvard, everything. No one wants to talk about their downsides. No one wants to talk about their struggles. And I want to normalize talking about the most difficult points of our life, because not only does that make us more self-aware, make us more willing to accept, okay, maybe we were wrong, maybe we made mistakes. How do we go forward? It's also creating the environment for us to be more intimate with other people and be able to express more genuine feelings, which is the first step to making good friendships. You can be friendly with anyone. A true friend is someone you can trust with some of the more deeper, more terrifying aspects of your experience. You want strong friends, not just friends. You want strong friends.
So a little bit there. Yeah, so I think that that plays right into what we were talking about in the beginning about the term, where actually not the term, but the sentiment as well of toxic masculinity, and how it's that masculinity isn't, that term makes it seem like masculinity is inherently toxic, whereas what we would say is toxic masculinity is really these men who aren't able to wear their scars and aren't able
Exactly.
to
In many
uh,
ways,
uh
they're cowards.
yeah.
They don't know how to express themselves. They're scared of being themselves. And quite frankly, I can't think of anything more unmasculine than being afraid of being yourself.
Yeah.
So I
And
agree with you completely.
yeah, I mean, the but there's this, going back to the culture of what men are expected to live up to. You're supposed to be this strong and masculine dude, but being and again, not to dive back into the weeds, but we have a generation of men being raised by women and not learning how to deal with those emotions and be masculine in a healthy way. And then they grow up and then they push it all down and they rage, and then that's toxic behavior, and that's the absence of masculinity.
Exactly. But I'll add something else to this. Another thing that I talk about in terms of communities is finding good mentors. Here's ultimately the sad truth. If a young man does not have good mentors, he's going to find some, they're not going to be very good. If you're young, 19, and you get sent to prison, it's a godsend for crime because you're in a place where they're hardened criminals and they're going to be your role models for the next few years. We don't want that to happen. It's very important, which is why I encourage this. If you have had a difficult life, please dedicate something you can do to help other children. I did a lot of volunteer work. I used to do math tutoring for kids. A lot of kids had behavioral issues. Some of them were at risk. I spent a lot of my volunteering time in high school and some in college doing that. That was my way to give back to the community. I encourage everyone to find some way to be active in their community, and to younger men to set that example. I can be brave. I can talk about the times I was scared. I felt like I was inadequate, and saying, this is how I come over that. Because when we show people, all right, this is a bad thing that happened to you, it's not the end of the world, you're giving them hope. It's why I reject the red pill. I prefer the hope pill. Okay. I want to give people hope.
I like that.
Let's fix problems. I think
definitely.
A man is at his best when he's building a strong community and fixing problems. That's 100%. What I want.
And I just to book on the red pill thing, there's definitely a lot of information in that area that is crucial for a man to know. But again, you reach a point of diminishing returns. You can once you get the basics and you're like, oh, okay, the world isn't this Disney fairy tale. I do actually have to do this, that, and the other. Nobody's coming to save me, any of that. But then it's like, okay, now don't worry about chasing girls, stay on your purpose, and all of this stuff. I think there is a toxic culture building in some of these spaces where guys are, instead of simping on OnlyFans for a girl and actually getting some wank material, they're sending in $500 super chats to like the Fresh and Fit podcast, where they're just bringing in these bimbos to rail on them. And I'm not gonna lie, more often than not, I like to tune in for a little bit just because it's entertaining.
It's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are guys who take this, and I don't know if you're familiar with the drama that just happened with them.
You've educated me a little bit on it. I looked into it afterwards.
Yeah, long story short, they're kind of fronting. They're taking some things from other creators and kind of mashing it together. Spend a lot of money on their presentation, and they're just not walking. They're just not walking the talk. But
style over substance.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think the way that they express themselves in general, the way that they speak, is geared to a younger audience. And so you have younger, teenagers, young 20s watching this stuff and like, oh, owning these bitches, finally, yeah. And again, as much as I get pleasure from it every now and again too, I understand that it is a guilty pleasure and that it's not something to put that much value into beyond the very, very, very basic info that they specifically talking about Fresh and Fit, that they give that can help protect myself from getting my heart broken again. But yeah, definitely that space, the red pill, it's all these labels always end up.
I think it's a space for a lot of grifters, people who just say whatever to get popular. Generally speaking, I think, I'm very much the opposite. I am no style, all substance. That's kind of my, but
I like that guitar in the back.
Thank you. I wish I was way better at playing it than I really am. But no, that's the issue. Look, being a young man is terrifying. You're growing up. There's so many expectations of you. You don't really know what to do. I'm still pretty young. I really don't know what to do. What I can look at is role models in my life, the things to take away from them, good things, and some things that were not bad. One of my favorite role models of all time is my grandfather. He passed away 2 years ago, sadly. He was one of the closest people to me. The man, I dedicate an entire chapter to him. Live like a king. I have never met a man more honest, accountable, and fearless than him. At the age of 71, he was blind in one eye, lost half the nerves in his body. He's driving through the busy streets of Bangalore. I don't know how familiar you are with Indian traffic. He's driving through Bangalore on a motorcycle. and he
That's pretty
didn't
ballsy.
care. No. He survived back in the 90s, survived an assassination attempt from a loan shark, gangster. He like
That's some
made
badass shit.
No, he was a complete badass. And I love talking to him because I learned so many important things from him, which is this is one thing that he said. I say what you mean what you say, and you say what you mean. If my grandfather made you a promise, there is no force on heaven or hell that can stop him. If he says, I'm going to help you with this, it'll be done. Downside is he was also very demanding. If he asked you for something, you do it immediately.
Well, that's how to be a man, right? I love that.
Yeah.
And you come from good stock. And
yeah, so I can appreciate some of the good things that he did, but there was an issue that I noticed with him, which is that he would never admit when he was wrong. He'd always double down. He was in a bad position. He'd try to make it work, but he would never admit when he was wrong. And that made it very difficult and very painful for me to watch as he developed diabetes. He wouldn't take his medication on time. He wouldn't eat healthy. He survived to 71 out of pure willpower, and I admire that. He could have lived to 91 if he would have taken the steps. So this is something that I wanted to balance, which is being humble. You should never let your pride be what powers you. You should say, I am dedicated to being a good person. I want to be a good person. I will fight towards being a good person, but I am ready to be corrected if I'm wrong. If I make a mistake, I'm going to find it. I'm going to own up to it. I'm going to make sure I never repeat it. If I say sorry to you, that's a promise that I will never do it again.
And I think that's a really good point. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, continue. You were saying?
I was saying that's a really good point because it is. It's not to say that you obviously you want to keep your word, and that that is a core tenet of integrity, and not just being a man, but being a good moral person is living authentically.
Exactly. And I think this is the struggle that a lot of people do. If you're very stubborn, there are some people who are very conscientious, they're stubborn, they get things done. Sometimes they deal with the blind spot of not being able to handle criticism. And I think that is a dangerous place to be if you're a man. If you're a man, you must be you must be strong and flexible, like a rope. You should be ready to change directions if the situation needs it. If I say, I want to be a good boss, then I can never, ever dismiss a complaint from my employee that I wasn't kind enough, or I didn't do the right thing, or I made the poor decision, because I should always take that into account. Am I living up to the image that I make for myself? It's important that we have strong self-images and we do our best to live up to them. That even means doubting ourselves sometimes.
And I like what you said about pride not being your identity, exactly, which is different than saying you should not have pride, or that you shouldn't be prideful, when you have something to be proud of. But that shouldn't be, as you said, that shouldn't be your identity. You shouldn't be living for the pride or the clout, as it's known these days. That you should be proud because you're doing, again, you're just living authentically. You're not trying to be anyone for anything. You are that. Not only are you living authentically, but if you are living authentically and making shit happen and helping people and being a good person, you should be proud of that. But that's definitely different than being prideful, as like the religious sin of pride.
Yeah, so that's kind of the tightrope, because once again, it's always about balancing this. Mm-hmm. There are some really good elements that I've learned from my family, my dad, my grandfather, from even historical figures of what it means to be bad. There's some amazing feats of masculinity done in the past. There are also major blind spots, which is why I say we can't just have like a single track. This is one person, he did everything right, follow him completely. That is ludicrous. We have to say wisdom is in every source, kind of Hegelian in that sense. We look for who did what right and try to create a best system for what it means to be a man. It's that also means that you're always going to have to question yourself. You're always going to say, did I do too much? Did I do too little? A person who's lazy is going to pretend that is going to think that they worked hard.
They don't ask themselves those questions.
A person who's truly hardworking, they're going to be worried, even after spending days and nights working, that they didn't do enough. And I want everyone to be in that position, because it won't give you immediate success. Very few things will give you immediate success. Maybe cleaning up your diet, living a healthier lifestyle, exercising a little, that'll give you immediate improvements to your mood. But all of these things is a journey, and I want to give people the encouragement to do that.
That's
Because
yeah.
yeah,
That's definitely advice that any a man or woman, that anybody should have, but especially in again, the cultural messages we're getting today, it doesn't seem that it's valued as much as it used to be. So I have a question. You were talking about your grandfather, who seems to be this very in a good way, stereotypically masculine man. And then I would
he was also a
assume,
feminist, if you would believe that.
yeah, I would believe that. I am curious how you would see what is positive masculinity in 2 generations ago versus and maybe you could speak to different cultures as well, but more specifically, generation. What do you think is different about your grandfather's type of masculinity and the type of masculinity that men of today should have?
So I think that the big thing is, while my grandfather had incredible stick-to-itiveness, he was driven, he was ready to move forward at any point. He made a lot of mistakes. He started a lot of businesses because a lot of his businesses failed. He'd make poor decisions, whether it was in the catering business, not listening to other people's advice, not looking at data. He's very gut-driven. Unfortunately, that led him to bad places like borrowing money from a loan shark who wanted to off him. Wanted to bomb his motorcycle.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's how he survived that. But he invited a lot of chaos because while he was very strong, he relied on his strength while neglecting other parts of living a healthy life.
Interesting.
So I think that's the thing. You don't want to be too enamored by your own success. You don't want to think, okay, I did this one great thing. That's enough. That'll solve all my problems. That's where arrogance comes from. And that kills many a man.
So would you say that masculinity has, or what it means to be masculine has changed? Or do you think that while, your grandfather was an extremely masculine man, there are ways that, he wasn't masculine in ways that, you may not be as masculine as him in some ways, but you have, you know what I'm saying?
What I want to perfect off of my grandfather is I very much like my grandfather in the sense that I'm very driven. If I want something, I will do it. I'm also like, I care a lot of time. I spend a lot of time with the family. I'm a family man. I want a strong family. I love my family. I have been places like if I need to pick up my little sister when she was in school or whatever, I would never be late. I would always show up 2 minutes before time. Because for me, like my grandfather has taught me, when you make a promise to someone, you better keep it. I hate being late. The standard stereotype is Indians are always late. My grandfather was never late. He was always punctual. I
Really?
say if
I didn't know that was a stereotype.
Indian Standard Time. That's a phrase. If you know enough Indians, you'll see it's real.
I've seen CPT, but we're not going to spell that.
IST is worse than CPT. Let me tell you. Oh,
really?
It's way worse. But that's something my grandfather would never tolerate. He'll say, you made a promise, you keep it. But he had the downside of biting off more than he could chew, and sometimes things would fall apart. That's something I'd had to learn. I had to learn that, okay, expand your limits, expand the capability of what you can, but until you do, be wise about what you choose to do.
Definitely.
So while I might not be as grit driven and like just bite down and push my faith forward, I think that I can create I'm hoping to create better outcomes than he did.
Cool. So and would you say that you have a different type of masculinity, or that masculinity itself evolves over time? Or I think both or neither.
I think the definition culturally, or the aesthetic of what it means to be a man, changes over time. At least in his day, my grandfather was considered very manly just because he had a job. Now everyone has a job. He lived in a society where women didn't work. It was
so. Let me rephrase. So the things that were like having a job, the things that were considered masculine over different time periods. Do you think it's simply what we value in that changes, or do you think masculinity is a more static concept that manifests differently?
I think that there are
Or
certain
both or
tenets of
neither?
masculinity. There are certain tenets of masculinity that will always be static. There'll be some expectations that men will be the ones who will pick up arms if there's a threat, that you are going to be there in case, like, because you're bigger, they're stronger. There's this element of sexual dimorphism that, all right, if a fight starts off, a man should go in and try to break it up. Or in this case, like, it's your job to defend yourself. Whereas we would never tell a 5 foot tall petite woman, it's your job to defend yourself if a larger man is stalking her. No, that's an unfair expectation to have on anyone that tiny.
So then let me just to play devil's advocate. I don't know. Did you see? There's a video that was going around from a Steelers game where there was a white couple and the girl like shoves a black dude, and then he goes to smack her, and the husband gets up and the black dude knocks out the white husband. And this was actually, I saw it from an Eminent Preach video. And they were they were saying the part of what is women don't understand. Men operate under a constant understanding of the threat of violence, and that creates not comfort but structure in the sense that you're not going to go up to in the same way that you wouldn't expect that small woman to fight off a stalker. You can also see that it's not the same, that even though a small dude would still be expected to stand up for himself. You know what I mean?
Okay, so this is where I would change. I would say we shouldn't expect people. We should always expect people to at least try to fight for themselves. We shouldn't expect everyone to be successful to fight for themselves. If you're a smaller person, regardless of men and women, I'm never going to give you the unfair burden of dealing with a much larger, much stronger person, because
but
you
is
should
that not?
try.
Yeah. Okay.
You should at least try. There's no expectation that you should be successful.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. So I was gonna say, if I got a 5 foot, I'm 5'4". If I got a 5'2" girl with me, and somebody breaks in the house, it don't matter how big he is. It's still my responsibility as the man to step out and like you're saying, at least try to handle it.
Yeah.
And same thing in this video, dude got knocked out. He was, but he stood up for his girl.
Yeah, and I'll hit on something that you said. Men and women have a different understanding of violence. It's not that women don't have the same understanding of violence as men. They have one that's it's tailored to their limitations. Very few women will walk out at night without their phone on them, or walk alone. Women travel everywhere, into the bathroom in groups.
That's a good point.
Because they understand there are other types of violence that I have to deal with that men don't have to deal with. Whereas a man knows that if I shove someone, even lightly, even playfully, it can escalate. Women, they don't expect that, because very few women are capable of creating the same amount of force as men. There are like some really strong.
And even though the numbers overwhelmingly say that men, and more specifically, less physically capable men, are far more likely to be attacked just randomly on the street than any woman, the feeling of not wanting to walk alone because something could happen is not really, you don't feel better because of, oh, well, more men get assaulted, so I'll probably be all right. So
yeah, those are two separate problems that we have to deal with, but those are two separate understandings of violence.
Yes, and yeah, I'm seeing that in a way where I think I would equate them more similarly, and because the numbers on men are higher, I would say, well, it's obviously more dangerous to be a man. And
it is definitely way more dangerous to be a man than a woman in the world.
Oh, for sure. And
I would say in the United States, I can't speak for other countries. There's some countries where it's way more dangerous to be a woman, but in the United States, especially, it's so much more dangerous to be a man than a woman.
Yeah. Oh, no question. And but I think I'm just pointing to again the feeling that you're unsafe is not affected by the numbers. If you're afraid, you're
That's
afraid.
true. That's true.
Stats that say you're probably going to be fine doesn't really help your fear. So that's definitely that's definitely a good point. I didn't really necessarily see it that way. Interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of the struggle, right? This is a tough part to balance, because whenever we talk about problems, there's some level of empathy that's just unnecessary, and there's some level of blame that, whether you want to or inadvertently, ends up happening. The struggle is, and I think this is something very important that men do, is we focus on solutions, not who caused the problem. If there's a problem, identify it. Don't fixate too much on who did that. That's in the past. Focus on going forward.
So would you say
That's
your
what I
book?
want to do.
So would you say your book is more not giving solutions, but rather promoting a solution-based outlook?
It's both. So I say, look for solutions first. This is the methodology for how you find solutions. Just like if you were in, let's say, a calculus textbook, it'll tell you these are the types of problems that you should be able to solve. These are the critical thinking tools to do them. And here are examples of men solving them. I love using stories as examples. When I talked about men who have an incredible, I don't, Joe Biden is a complicated person. I love him as a person. I don't really like him that much as a president, though in the last few weeks, he's done the last few parts of his presidency, he's done some really good stuff that I liked, like the child tax credit. But I liked him as a person because when he was still a senator, right after he was sworn into office, he lost his daughter and his wife in a car accident. And then with his infant children, he would drive them up and down Delaware, getting them the treatment and the trauma care that they needed, while at the same time serving as a senator. And his ability to communicate with people, talk about his own grievances, and move with other people is something that just made him very likable. And
you wouldn't do that for your kids?
For him. No. It's not the fact that he did that. He's a great father. But the fact that he was able to talk honestly about, this was a very difficult time for me. This is an issue that I faced, and that I want to make sure no one else is in that position. Him fighting for material changes in childcare and mental health treatment for children, even passing the Violence Against Women Act in the 1990s. He was very capable of talking about his trauma, his suffering, his pain in a way that motivated other people to work with him to solve problems. I want to give that example, whether or not you agree with his politics or disagree. I have many disagreements with his politics. He was effective in using this part of masculinity, which is being able to talk about your trauma, to be effective and get results, which is what I want everyone to be able to do.
So, and again, I like what you're saying there, and I just want to throw this out there to see what you think about it. Going back to how we were talking about different types of masculinity, comparing yourself to your grandfather. Again, love him or hate him, Trump definitely had very strong masculine characteristics, and that were very different than the type of characteristics Biden has. And in both cases, with both people, their brand of what is masculinity has I think has a place, and it's not necessarily. I'm not going to sit here and say Trump is a great guy. I'm not going to say that, I wanted him to be president. I will definitely admit that his presidency wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. But I'm not a supporter or anything. But I just think, he was I think I'm using this word correctly, a MacGuffin for being able to point out a lot of problems in the establishment. But what do you think about his, the fact that, you, again, love him or hate him, you can't argue that he isn't a masculine guy?
I'm going to definitely argue he's probably been one of the least masculine presidents or world leaders I've ever seen. I'll give you the reasons why. Donald Trump came into office with certain promises. He's going to build the border wall. He's going to get out of Afghanistan. He had certain promises.
We are out of Afghanistan, though. We're leaving now, though, right?
Under Biden.
After Trump, we were supposed to go with Trump.
We'll get bogged down in the details, but Trump's withdrawal plan had troops left advisory positions after the withdrawal. Biden removes.
It was going to be a disaster either way. So
yeah, it was. So the reason why I would say that is because Trump as a person. Now, regarding the politics, I had the opposite view of Trump. I thought he wouldn't be that bad. He turned out much worse than I expected. It's why I immediately voted Biden. But in Trump, in terms of what I consider to be a man, Trump spent a lot of time whining, complaining about the deep state, the establishment, excuses for why he couldn't get things done.
So, and again, I'm from here on with Trump, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not a fan of Trump.
But I understand.
But if for the sake of argument, if he is legitimately, let's just take it at face value that his grievances were legitimate. What do you, if those things really were happening, what else? The reason he got elected was not because of his political prowess, was because of his ability to get his message across.
Yeah. Right? So he was, so if I view masculinity as you mean what you say and you say what you mean, and you're capable of doing the work to get things done.
Well, real quick though, I think we can both agree that any politician, when it comes to these basic things of accountability and keeping your promises, there's a different level. We don't hold.
So there are degrees to this. Obviously, politicians are on the same level as regular people,
right?
And this
they lie. That's their job. So,
I'll give you an example. If you wanted something done from a president, if the president says you can get anything you want, are you going to ask for a bill, a legislation from them, or are you going to ask for staff members? You get to pick who's on their Senate Arms Committee. You get to pick who's in the Department of Defense, who's in the Oval Office, who's the Secretary of Labor. Which one would you say?
I don't know if I know enough about civics to give a meaningful answer.
So I followed politics, did a lot of economics research on this. The most effective way is to pick good candidates in places of power. A bill could pass or fail. It could survive Congress. It could not.
Okay, that's
if you are in the executive branch, who your Department of Labor is has massive implications for what's going to happen in regard to labor policy, unemployment, all of that, because they have so much power. Oh, because the government is so big, they have so much power, small things to do. Donald Trump routinely trusted incorrect people. This is like the big meme of his presidency. You're in one day, you're out another day. There was such a debacle where there were cases where, like when he was trying to pull out of NAFTA, his Treasury Secretary, Gary Cohen, literally swiped off important documents off his desk so that he couldn't sign it within the deal, the timeline of the provision. There were cases where he picked people who sabotaged himself, which I just think
I agree with you, but the question, I think that's a simplistic. It's simplistic to attribute that to masculine or not masculine. I think that because in his business ventures, he knows exactly what he's doing for the better or worse for us. He's certainly making money, and so I would just attribute that to the fact that he's not a politician, and which is why he shouldn't have been president. But I don't know that speaks to his masculinity.
So I would say that in the world where you are ineffective at getting legislation done, your inability to own that, okay, I made a mistake, I trusted the wrong people, that is definitely unmasculine behavior. Have you ever heard Trump admit that he was wrong about something?
No, but I mean,
I've heard Biden admit multiple times about things that he was wrong.
He literally said we weren't. He literally said everything that wasn't going to happen. And again, I don't want to get too into it.
Okay,
but we can't act like Trump lying in the context of politics is that much worse than any other politician lying in that context.
No, we're not comparing Trump of lying. It's just a matter of saying I made a mistake. Or something as simple as that. I don't think I've ever heard Trump say that. I can give you instances where Biden said it about, I was wrong to pass this special bill. He passed, there were provisions of the Violence Against Women Act that were incredibly harmful, that created harmful stereotypes, harmful policing, especially against men, that would make it very where if a woman said, oh, this man was abusing me, it was easier for them to get a divorce, and that there were certain levels that were not properly, you didn't have to properly substantiate with enough evidence. It made it difficult for men to fight against false accusations of domestic violence. There were some provisions, and he's apologized saying, at the time I was wrong. Mistake was made. He voted in favor of Iraq, and then he said I was wrong to vote for that. And I think that type of accountability, that is an order of magnitude greater masculinity than saying that, which as Trump has done in the past few days, where we should have stayed out of Iraq, or we should pull out of Afghanistan, at the same time saying that we should get more troops in. Whereas I think Joe Biden, politician, take everything he says with a grain of salt, has done a better job admitting that he's made a mistake, which I think is a tenet of being a masculine man. So I can say that
again. I hate defending Trump, but I just feel that Biden has little understanding of anything that he has. He has a better understanding of those things. The reason that Trump was gonna pull the troops out and then went back on, it's because of the generals lying about how many troops we had and stuff like that. So here's the lack of accountability. But so again, the man never should have been in office because he was not prepared for that particular job. So to draw a parallel, I think if it has nothing to do with masculinity. If I were to go to your job and not do very good as an economist, or you were to go to my job and not be very good as a dog trainer.
So right? No. One thing is efficacy, and second is making excuses for your efficacy. So I think you would agree that if I said, I talk big games, like I'm going to be the best dog trainer in the world, I try to do your job, I fail, and then I say, I was wrong in this, I made mistakes, here's how I'm going to fix it going forward. I think you would say that's a much more masculine action than me saying, me never acknowledging that I made a mistake and doubling down saying I was the greatest dog trainer in the world. I think there are differences in that, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely. The fact is,
but I think any arm of politics and mainstream media is only a degree of difference, not kind, from Trump. I don't think. I
agree definitely. With you on that. So, but if we were just look at the
that's why I don't want to get bogged down in like policies. I think. Even if in that way, surrounding himself with the right type of people, he didn't have those masculine traits, there are masculine traits that Trump has that are different than masculine traits that Biden has.
I'd love you to expand that. I just want to add this one thing. If what you're saying, if what Trump was saying was true, that it's a generals that were sabotaging me, if he came out and say, I was wrong to trust these generals, I will never do it again, I made a mistake, I'm owning up to it, immediately he's the same level of masculine as Biden. That statement changes everything, because that's taking accountability.
In that context.
Yeah, in every context, he says, the reason I failed is because I made a mistake.
Hold on. If they were going to stand toe-to-toe and fight, Donald Trump is definitely more masculine than Joe Biden. So it's not blanket statement.
Fight as in physical fisticuffs? Yes. I mean, they both are old men. Your money is on... I don't know who would win. But
my point is, we're talking about different types. We're talking about different types of masculinity.
All right.
So if we're saying they are well, my contention is that they are both masculine, and they exhibit different types of masculinity. And so I'm curious
what types of masculinity Trump exhibits that you see. I could be blindsided. I don't know.
Confidence, success in his business endeavors, the ability to mitigate risk, just money, the presence of mind to understand how to run that big of an empire. And I mean, as bad as he was at president, he wasn't a politician, and the country did burn down, but only because the leftists were doing it. I'll give you a good example, because my dad's a big Trump supporter, and I remember one of my biggest qualms with Trump that I can specifically remember was, I don't know if you'll remember this, but there was something going on with North Korea, and I don't know if he tweeted out or he said it out, but it's something, they'll meet fire and fury and they're like never seen before.
I remember
or something like that. And I was like, holy shit, that's fucking reckless, dude. Like, they're a nuclear superpower. And my dad's answer to when I bring that up is, well, it worked. And my rebuttal to that is, but he didn't know that, and it was reckless to have done that. And whether or not, the fact that it did work does change how we view this event in hindsight. Yes.
Okay, so something working once, if something reliably works, that changes everything.
But again, this is what
a broken
I mean.
Clock is right twice a day.
Right, but it's the media wanted to portray Trump as this bumbling idiot that who would one day just slip on a banana peel and accidentally do a backflip, but then the next day he'd slip on another banana peel and do another backflip, and then he kept slipping and slipping. And so, at what point are we saying he's not slipping? He's actually performing. And he's actually doing more than what we think. And I'm not going all QAnon here, but I'm just saying the game of politics and the game of business are very different, but they share so much in when it comes to the psychology of others. And I just don't know how I don't know how you can deny.
So the strategy that he used with North Korea was successful, but he tried that same strategy with Iran, and that didn't end up working. So I don't know how we would evaluate this.
But I mean, but again, those are he didn't try that same strategy, because it wasn't the same thing where, like, we're about to do something, what are you going to do? And he was like, all right, go ahead and do it. I'll fuck around and find out. That wasn't the Iran situation. It was a little bit more diplomatic than that.
Well, actually, the North Korea situation was very diplomatic. He was in talks with Moon Jae-in, the president of South Korea. He was working behind the scenes, arranging meetings with Kim Jong-un. There were back channel communications. There are like multiple, usually when nations engage in diplomacy like this, there are multiple levels. There's meetings between leaders. Then there's Secretary of State between Secretary of State. There are third parties like North Korea and China. So
but did he not cut through all of that by just making his statement that went viral?
I don't have enough evidence or data to be confident about any claim. I can't say that it worked, or I can't even say that it helped. I can't even say that
North Korea did not fire nukes on us. So that the attempt to use that
no country will ever fire nukes at us. Country
says who?
Mutually assured destruction. Nuclear weapons have ushered in an age of peace, because the cost of getting into war with another nuclear armed power is mutually assured destruction. And
but you have entire populations of people who don't believe that this is real life, and that real life begins after death. And many of these people are.
I'll give you a great example. How familiar are you with the conflict between India and Pakistan?
Probably enough to get along with, if you have a general point, but I don't know too much about this.
Okay, so India and Pakistan, they hate each other. The amount of hate between them is far greater than the US and North Korea, US and Iran. They both are nuclear armed countries. They even got into a couple of minor scuffles. No war. They had one war since they got nuclear weapons. They had 4 or 5 before. That war lasted, it was basically a border skirmish, lasted 12 days.
So then why was the fire and fury thing not a good thing to do?
Well, I can't claim that it was good. I can't say it's a good thing or a bad thing. There's just no way to knowing that. That's just something impossible to know. We don't know if that is what caused peace, which is hard to say.
But
I'm not going to make a judgment on that.
So, but I'm saying what happened caused what happened. So if that happened, and then we are now,
it could have been that Moon Jae-in, in part of collaboration, making sure that Trump and North Korea were communicating properly. He was the one facilitating the peace deal. And Trump might have made it more difficult for him to do his job by the fire and fury words. We don't know that. That's the issue.
We don't.
It's correlation and causation.
Right.
Not causation.
But what I'm saying is, if we were in a position where nobody was ever going to fire nukes, then why was cutting through all of that to say, yo, get the fuck out of here, you're not going to do shit? Why is that a bad thing?
Well, I don't know if it's a bad thing. That's the issue. We don't have evidence to know if it was good, bad, or neutral.
Right.
So I can't make a claim on this.
But you're saying it's not masculine. Or are you
making threats that you're not going to enforce? I would generally consider that not masculine behavior. Whether or not it works would be irrelevant. I would just say. So
let's take Trump out of it, and let's present, because those words were very bombastic. And that's what, I was taken back by it at first. Like, yo, this is like a North Korea, like, calm down. But, the art of war is understanding your enemy and what you can and can't do, and what will happen if you do this. And so either Trump is an extremely, extremely, extremely lucky and reckless guy, or maybe we have to give him a little bit more credit than CNN would.
Look, I don't like the establishment media. That's not who I base off of. My thoughts
Well, I'm
on
just
Trump
saying
come from independent on actions that he has done.
Right, but I'm just using CNN because they're the orange and bad channel.
Yeah. So my issues with Trump and foreign policy is I don't know if he was effective in any of the goals.
Take Trump out of it. I'm talking about the actions themselves.
So yeah, the actions themselves, I'd have to evaluate them. There's no way for me to know if how important a president's tweets are. I never cared about Trump's Twitter. He said the weirdest things. He said some things that were actually pretty funny. I never cared about his Twitter in reality. I always cared about the laws that he passed and the laws that he enforced. That was my major objections with him, was the laws he enforced and how he enforced them, and the laws that he passed, because the harms that those created, those are what convinced me that Trump was way worse president to vote for Biden. I could care less about what he tweeted. I care about the end result of his job as a president. That's what I evaluate. For example, in 2020, he signed a deregulation bill for the EPA that would allow fracking water to contaminate drinking water for up to 1 million Americans, mostly in places like Kentucky, places that actually ended up voting for him. Those environmental costs are real. Lead in the water is going to harm childhood brain development. The fact that deregulation made it so that more people's water was contaminated makes it very easy for me to claim, okay, bad president, made a bad decision. I mean, those are what I look at to evaluate whether a president is good or bad. I don't care what CNN says.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I was just using that as a flippant example. And again, I don't want to get to. I do want to ask you a little bit about the publishing process before we wrap up. But yeah, I think we agree on so very many things. And there's just a slice of life where we just see things different. And hey,
I think our disagreements are just from perspective.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I think that if I gave you a policy plan, let's say I'll tell you this plan, I've done a crunch of numbers. It's going to make it so that more men have role models. It's going to reduce crime, all these great things. It's like, this is how it works. You might say, okay, I don't like how some of these things work, but data is data. If it works, right? We'll agree with that. We'll work on it. Done. I care about that. Solutions. If we agree on solutions, we can fix so many problems. There's no point in disagreeing on causes.
Right. 100%. I definitely agree that there's not enough focus on solving things, and there's too much emphasis on complaining and victimizing yourself, either as an individual or as a group.
Look, in my politics, I'm a libertarian socialist. I'm about as far left as you can go in America. Like one day I'd love to abolish government and we'll all be free. One day.
Well, we'll leave that. We'll leave that for the second episode. But I would consider myself a libertarian as well, but probably more center libertarian, maybe because of the Overton window. You might call me libertarian right. I grew up with such an aversion to the GOP, the Republicans, conservatives, and all that. But I do think there is a new age of conservative politics that's in between, the strong leftist big government and the old GOP.
The rise of the barstool conservative, right?
Yeah. I mean, for lack of a better term, yeah. So, we've been going for a while, but if you don't mind, I just had a couple questions about the publishing process with the book. So you have the Indiegogo. I know that's it's a crowdsourcing crowdfunding site, but is that specifically for authors? Do you have is the book already written? Where are you in that process?
So right now, I'm working with a publisher, New Degree Press. What they're doing is a hybrid publishing model where I raise some of the funding. They helped me set up this pre-sale campaign. I raised the funding after the initial point. So I sent my first draft to them. That's written. going forward for like printing, marketing, doing the second draft revisions, hiring the second round of editors. That's the money I have to raise for by myself. So that's why we have this Indiegogo. The funding here allows me to pay for my second editor. I've already had 2 editors before, so this is my 3rd editor actually, to go through with a fine tooth comb, refine some of my ideas, make them a little stronger, because we can always add more. Help me a little bit more with the research point. There's some more evidence and quotations that I need in my paper, and then do the copy editing, and then do the actual printing. The benefit of this is I own all of the rights to my book, not my publishing company.
Nice. Okay.
I would like to be rich. I'm not making a single cent from this book. Everything is going to be sold is exactly at cost of goods sold. I'm not making a single cent of this, no profit. I want this book in the hands of as many people as I can get it to. So because I have the rights to it, I can make it as cheap as possible. And I want to make sure that people can have access to this. Because I really don't believe that knowledge should have any barriers. I want people to have it free.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. And so this, I mean, because I want to write a book eventually, and I've got a lot of ideas rolling around, but I don't have enough of a focus to know what I would be writing about. But that's definitely something on the horizon for me. Is that is the way you're doing it a common way of
It used to be very uncommon, but there's this guy named Eric Custer. He's a professor at Georgetown. He's actually the one who reached out to me. He basically brought me along. He's created something called the Creator Institute, where he brings young people who are interested in maybe going to consulting, doing TED Talks, they want to do something creative there, or some people are in industry, and he gets them to write a book and makes that a gateway, not necessarily to make them authors, but opening up career opportunities for them. For me, this is less of a careers thing, more of me doing good for the world. Though I think the research I've done for this book will go a long way for convincing more universities to accept me for their PhD programs.
No, yeah.
What I'm hoping for, at least from him, is he gave me a lot of insight on how to write books. He's also an author himself. He's also made it accessible for more and more people to get to the author process, because like it or not, the first book you write is always going to be garbage. I'm pretty sure that this book that I write, I am wary of it not being as good as I think it is. I know there's some parts that I could do better, but I'll never be perfect. I know for a fact that I tried my best on this first book, and I think there's some very good ideas, and I'm hoping that at least some of them are very accessible to people or compelling for people. But I'm planning on writing more and more in the future, and this is at least the first step to making people better writers and better authors. Awesome. So this is a new model, and I'm hoping that it catches on. More people should be writing. Yeah. I think,
and it makes sense that you would the fact that the book may not the final product may not be exactly what you're happy with. It's not your ideal, but you have we live in a world now where you have the opportunity to have a bigger presence just in the world. And so if the book is just a gateway for people to find you in what you're doing, then I think that is, as good as the contents of the book itself, as good for that person. It's as good for you. Agree. Then, and I have a similar mentality with the book, because while I definitely, I mean, I can talk, but I definitely express myself better in writing. A couple of times I've had to slow down and get my thoughts together, and they, just writing just works better for me.
I'm the exact opposite. In the beginning, I wasn't writing at all. I was just speaking out and having a speech to text translation. Afterwards, I started developing the acumen for writing. But for me, talking is almost always easier.
Interesting. I think it's just because I've been obsessed with social media, so I've just learned to express myself that way.
I hate social media so much. My editor literally yelled at me and forced me to make a Twitter. That's the position where I was in.
Well, hey, it brought you to me, and hopefully, eventually, this will.
I'm grateful for this.
Yeah, I definitely am. I am super happy with how this went down. I'm definitely looking forward to the release of this book and any work you have in the future. And you have an open invitation anytime you got something new. come on.
I appreciate
And
it. Thank you so much, Adam.
do you want to give people the Indiegogo, your Twitter, anything else?
Yeah, I can also send you the links, but I am Anirudh
Yeah,
Garg.
we'll have everything there. But
Yeah, so I can't because I don't remember all the links in my head.
so just search. What should they search on Indiegogo?
So the title of the book, which I probably should have led with this, is The Greater Man.
No, I did the solo segment, so we read the whole.
All right, perfect.
So just search the Greater Man on Indiegogo and help us get this out to the world. And
all right, thank you very much.
You're doing great work, man. I definitely, like I said, I can't wait to see what this is, and I'm definitely gonna read this one.
Oh wow, I think that's the highest honor that I can get for a podcast called "I Didn't Read Your Book."
Yeah, nobody's gotten it yet. So
you're violating your own rules. I love it.
Well, I didn't read the book. Now I can go read the book. We've already done the podcast.
A man keeps his word.
That's right. Well, all right. Thank you so much again for coming on. The Anirudh, last name
Garg.
Sorry, man. Anirudh Garg. Part. I know it is, but I've spent too much time focusing on your first name. Go pledge to his book, and we will definitely be talking soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, man. All right. Well, I'm very sorry about butchering your name a million times, but Anirudh Garg, that is his name. Please go check out his podcast that he didn't tell me about. In the podcast. In my podcast, he didn't tell me that he had his own podcast. It's called The Dialectic, and his last name, which is Gang. So I think he said it's more political. And as you could tell, he is a lefty, a libertarian socialist, as he calls himself. You know, if this was all really, I would have dug more into the issues and things like that. I mean, I think as it is for a show that was about his book, we did talk a lot about you know, other things, and so you know, I don't want anyone to think that I was either agreeing with things that I don't agree with, or just letting him go off easy. This was never meant to be a grilling thing. That's not what this show is. That being said, clearly we had some disagreements, maybe more semantic than otherwise, but that should never ever stop you from having a conversation with someone. And especially because whether just between me and him, the fact is, you and most people, whatever you disagree about, chances are the overlap of what you do agree about is far more than what you disagree. And understanding that allows you to dig into what you disagree about and why you disagree about it, and not take it personally, because you know you agree with a lot of other stuff. So you know, I was you know, when I first talked to him, and he you know, I saw the name of his book, and he was talking about masculinity. The first thing that came to my mind was all this YouTube red pill channels, some that I mentioned, like you know, Fresh and Fit, Kevin Samuels, Coach Greg Adams, Mr. Organic, things like that. And I'm not a fan of all of those. I am aware of that space, but clearly he is not in that space. So I had to see. It was interesting to see somebody who's talking about men's issues and masculinity who's not in that space. It was interesting to see what types of things that I said that I assumed he would agree with by being an advocate for these things that he didn't agree with. So that was really interesting. And you know, very simply, wanting better for men, specifically wanting better for men, is not anything against anyone, and it is beneficial to everyone. Toxic masculinity is a lack of masculinity. True masculinity is the deterrent to toxic behavior. So I had I had a lot of fun with this one. This is a really good one. And I definitely I want to check out that book when it comes out. So definitely go check out the Indiegogo, donate, and help him get that message out. Because agree or disagree, the discussion that it starts is one that needs to be had. So until next time, thank you for tuning in. I am Let your host, and this was I Didn't Read Your Book. Peace.